Chapter 8:16. The dark sword. Several hours passed in a blink of an eye. At that moment, the forge was filled with the sound of a hammer hitting the metal. Michael was alone in the forge, peacefully forging his dark swords. Vidora was asleep after helping Michael clean up the forge. After Michael spent hours sweeping the floor, cleaning up the walls, and destroying all the rusted metalworks, the forge looked pristine. Almost all the tools needed to forge powerful weapons and armor were readily available in the forge except for ores and some other materials. Standing before the anvil, Michael raised his hammer and brought it down on the black sword. His muscles twitched and bulged up as he kept hitting the sword with the hammer. Michael was drenched in sweat as he looked like he had just bathed. Even after the dark metal cooled down, it radiated a strange heat that was powerful enough to melt a man's skin. Usually, a heated sword would be submerged in oil or water in some situations. On the contrary, Michael had molten lava in one metal barrel and bone-chilling ice created by the ancient ice core in another. The dark sword was slowly taking the shape Michael wanted it to. Its surface was crimson red after being hit by the hammer repeatedly. Finally, Michael raised the sword and submerged it in the lava. The sword remained submerged in lava for a while until Michael couldn't hold it by the end. His palms were bloody red due to the heat. When he took out the dark sword, hot lava oozed out from its surface. Michael immediately submerged the sword again in the frost beside the lava. The ice sizzled, turning into vapor because of the intense heat. As soon as he put the sword in the ice, countless tiny crimson-red lightning bolts crackled around the dark sword. "Few more hours to go," Michael mumbled under his breath before taking out the second sword and repeating the same process. As though nature itself had sensed the birth of dark swords, the sky above the mountain darkened. Unknown to Michael, a lightning storm was raging outside. As a result, the monsters outside were terrified to the core. The demon's grave had never seen heavy rain or a storm in thousands of years. But at that moment, the storm raged outside, along with hundreds of lightning bolts striking the realm from above. Michael paid no attention to the weather outside. Ayag slowly opened her eyes to the sound of rumbling thunder. The mountain trembled as thunderclaps echoed through the realm. Her vision was slightly blurred after the long nap. She shook her head, clearing her sight. Sarba and Cain woke up after her and saw Michael's back. To their surprise, they felt a strange, powerful energy in the forge. Moreover, they couldn't help hearing a strange buzzing noise. "Hey, you finished the swords?" asked Ayag. Michael slowly turned around with his new swords in his hand. Just the simple look of the dark sword stunned them speechless. The blade was as dark as midnight, with tiny crimson-red lightning bolts dancing around from the tip to the hilt. Light coming from the braziers was reflected on the blade's surface. In the faint light, Vidora noticed the complex engravings and runes, but they were almost unnoticeable to the naked eye. Any oblivious man could tell how exceptional the swords were. Michael gave the blade a matte black finish and designed the hilt like a dragon coiling around the sword. Unlike any other swords in the world, the dark swords were exceptionally heavy. Each sword weighed at least 50 kilograms and required immense raw power to swing around. But despite their weight, the swords were perfectly balanced. The swords were black from top to bottom except for the hilt, where the dragons had a tinge of redness, and their eyes glimmered icy blue due to the use of an ancient ice core. If the swords were not dashing enough, the lightning bolts crackling around the blade added an extra layer of beauty to them. "Let us see how sharp they are," Ayag asked curiously as Michael turned his gaze to the barrel with hot lava inside. He swung the dark sword across the barrel. When he swung the sword, the crackling noise sounded louder. Then, nothing happened for a second. Ayag frowned, but soon, half of the metal barrel slid down from its lower half. Michael felt no resistance from the metal barrel. To be honest, he didn't even feel cutting the metal barrel. The dark sword went through the metal barrel like a hot knife through very soft butter. Wow! Even Cain was surprised by the dark swords. "Just need to put a summoning rune on them when we return home," said Michael, swinging the swords in the air. Michael finally put the dark swords into the sheaths on his back. They formed an X on his back. This way, he could unsheath them faster than from the sheaths hanging on his waists. Plus, it would look cooler. With his dark swords finished, he could finally venture deep into the realm. He threw a final look at the forge and prepared to leave the place. "What do you say we take these babies for a trial run?" asked Michael as Vidora bobbed their heads up and down enthusiastically. Michael exited the forge through the corridor he came in the first place. Eventually, he reached the mountaintop and stood on the edge, looking at the realm before him. The sky was alive as heavy rain crashed furiously to the ground. Ancient trees in the distance toppled, lightning shattered the sky, and thunder shook the ground. Rain began to pour furiously, and monstrous tornadoes littered the realm. This storm was the worst Michael had ever seen. Rain fell like bullets, destroying anything and everything in its path. Out of nowhere, a loud thunderclap resonated in the sky. Michael stood there on edge, a step away from falling down. Due to the intense heat coming from the boiling lava, the droplets were vaporized before they could even reach the lava. Still, the vapor created a thick white mist around Mount Hades. "Look!" Iag pointed at the horizon as Michael saw a giant bat flying in his direction. As though the dark swords had sensed the threat, they produced more lightning bolts. These bolts crackled around the sheath as well as Michael. Cracking his neck, Michael took a step forward, dropping down from the mountain. Gravity pulled him down with enough force to create a large crater in the ground when he landed. If someone else fell from the mountain, their bones would have shattered to pieces, and their body would have turned into bloody mush. But Michael comfortably landed on his feet. He slowly walked forward as the bat flew closer and closer to Michael. The bat was at a half-immortal stage, several times stronger than the bat he fought outside the demon's grave. Michael unsheathed his dark swords and waited for the bat to attack him. The bat was big enough to cast a large shadow on the ground. When it flew closer to him, Michael heard a strange noise coming from its mouth. He stood still as the bat dived down to rip him apart with its claws. Finally, the bat was just a few meters away from Michael's head. In a blink of an eye, Michael threw the dark sword at the bat. The sword soared through the air like a bullet and went straight through the bat's chest. Blood splattered on the ground as the bat had a hole in its chest. The sword went clean through its chest and came outside. The bat roared in pain before crashing down to the ground. Screaming in pain, the bat flapped its wings frantically. But no matter how hard it tried to fly away, the bat simply couldn't. The dark sword penetrated its very heart. Vidora snickered at the bat as the bat roared with its eyes burning with pain and rage. Then, Vidora flew away to pick up the dark sword Michael threw. While Michael made his way to the bat with a second dark sword in his hand, the bat crawled backward in fear. Tsk. Michael showed his disapproval of the bat's actions by shaking his head. The bat could have avoided death if it chose to fly the other way. Although the past Dark Lord warned him about killing the monsters recklessly, he would not let go of those who attacked him alive. Since the bat tried to kill him, it was only fair that he returned the favor. By the time Michael was just an arm-reaching distance from the bat, Vidora had returned to him carrying his other sword in its legs. The bat groaned as Michael pressed its claws under his feet. When Michael clenched the swords tighter, the engravings on the blade lit up. He just swung the dark swords as the bat's head flew off of its shoulder. Ding! Congratulations to the host for killing a half-immortal stage level 4 monster. The reward is 1 million experience points and 25,000 badass points. Michael heard the system in his head. These dark swords were powerful enough to kill any immortals. They didn't need to be infused with an immortal bone like a typical immortal killing weapon. It took Michael only one swing to cut the bat's head clean off. Without its head, the bat's body violently twitched, splashing blood all over the place. Only then did Michael realize how powerful his swords were. He regretted not forging them way earlier. With these swords, his battle prowess shot through the roof. Vidora was stunned to see the dead bat on the ground. The battle literally lasted for a few seconds. Outside the demon's grave, the fusion stage bat gave Michael a headache as Iag had to use her power to disrupt its powers. But now, Michael killed the bat in a few seconds. After killing the bat, Michael flicked his sword, removing the blood on the blade. It's a pity. I was thinking of covering the blades with the dark flames, Michael sighed. Not to jinx the situation, but I have a feeling we will come across more monsters on our way, said Sarba. Speaking of which, where are we going next? Asked Iag. To a gold mine, said Michael. Chapter 8:17. Another world within the demon's grave. Killing the bat was only the first step of his big plan in the demon's grave. Michael didn't slow down or seek shelter despite the raging storm and the heavy rain. Granted, the storm and the rain made the terrain wet and walking difficult, but it also terrified the monsters. Everywhere Michael looked, he saw no monster. Even the colossal bull he saw from the mountain was nowhere to be seen. Lightning cracked the red sky, sending heaven's light through the storms. Even the rain came in orchestrated rhythm, appearing as the master of the scene yet arriving on unheard cues. The wind ran as if it had been restrained for time out of mind, and it was determined to outrun any chaser. The sound of it was a strange song, as if howling yearned for a melody. Michael was completely drenched in the rain. "We've been walking for hours," Saba said, sitting on Michael's shoulder. "Don't you have a spare long coat?" "I hate getting wet," Ayag complained. As she said, Michael wore nothing to cover his upper body except the sheath on his back. In his deep thinking, Michael didn't hear Ayag and Sarba. Instead, he was more focused on forming alchemy formulas in his head. There were no monsters or a threat to break Michael's concentration. He didn't even mind the raging storm. "He's not listening to us, is he?" asked Ayag as Kane shook his head. Michael crossed the meadows after almost 5 hours and saw a lake in the distance. Michael's destination was deep within the lake, according to the system. Thanks to his alchemist profession, Michael concocted a pill that enabled him to breathe underwater. If it wasn't for the high pressure under the lake, he could have used his mask. Since it wasn't the case, Msile had to connect this pill using extremely rare herbs from his herbal garden in the Sunrise sect. Even in an eerie place like the Demon's Grave, the lake glistened like a ruby under the red sky. In that land of creeping beauty lay a disk of brightest red. The lake was brighter than the colors of one's dreams. It was the minerals of the glacier that shone cyan, turquoise, and ruby red. Like a mirror on the wall, it was oval and flat. The surface was forever guarded against the winds by the crown of barren hills around. At the edge, the land met and carried right on as a perfect reflection. Looking up into the sky and down into the water was just the same. Although Michael sensed several monsters around him, none dared to attack him. Michael had a feeling the red lightning bolts around the dark swords had something to do with it. As usual, he asked the system about these lightning bolts but received no answer from it. Whenever the system went silent when he asked a question, it raised Michael's concern. For instance, the system gave no explanation or answers about the mysterious woman he met outside the Demon's Grave. Sometimes, Michael had to figure things out on his own without the system's help. "I hope you like getting wet," said Michael as Ayag rolled her eyes. "I just said I hate getting wet." "You are a jerk, Ghost," she bit Michael's ear. Nibbling Ayag's head, Michael walked closer and closer to the lake. With a flick of his wrist, Michael took out a sapphire blue pill and tossed it into his mouth. His muscles immediately ached, especially the back of his ears. It felt like someone was burning his skin with cigarettes. The pain lasted for a few minutes. Then, Vidora saw several gashes appearing behind his ears. Without wasting any time, Michael dived into the lake, swimming deeper and deeper. As his body moved through the clear water, he was surprised to see the golden sand and the sight around him. The first thing that caught his eye was the variety of sea life. Hundreds of fishes in every color of the rainbow, and more swam past him without fearing him. Some big fishes floated lazily as others disappeared with a flick of a bright fin. For a lake in a demon's grave, it was artistic to say the least. Luckily, Vidora didn't need any pill or potion to breathe underwater. They swam along with Michael like expert swimmers. As they were following Michael, their attention turned to the expanse of a coral reef that stretched as far as one could see. They blanketed the golden sand like a colorful bed sheet. Surprisingly, everything underwater was full of color and life. The red light coming from the dark swords illuminated the closest section of the reef, highlighting a formation of corals. Each section of coral was beautifully formed, but none was quite like any other. Michael was tempted to harvest some and put them in the lake near the castle. However, Michael was the type of person who would rather see a flower in a plant than in someone's head. "What is that?" Ayag asked her siblings in telepathy, looking at an octopus. The creature peeked its head over through the coral and gawked at them with its big eyes. Soon, the octopus moved through the coral, revealing itself for a moment before shrinking back into a crevasse. A hidden gem amongst corals. One of many. The deeper Michael swam, the prettier the lake turned out to be. Many unknown creatures buried themselves under the sand. The entire lake was like a treasure chest, enclosing unfathomable treasures in ever smallest sliver. Everything was deadly silent around Michael. But this silence was short-lived. Suddenly, they heard a chittering noise. When Michael looked over his shoulder, he saw 5 creatures that resembled dolphins skim by. With water all around them, they almost seemed to fly, moving effortlessly, propelling their sleek bodies swiftly forwards with a flick of a gray tail. According to the system, Michael still had a long way to reach his destination. He wondered how the things he needed could exist underwater. A while later, Michael was surprised to see a shipwreck. He wanted to investigate the shipwreck even though it didn't seem to have any treasures. But when he was about to swim toward the wreck, his view was obscured by a huge shark that drifted lazily by, pushing Michael and Vidora aside with the water it displaced. A whale shark, mouth stretched wide to gather food. To Michael's surprise, the shark was at the half-immortal stage. If Michael wanted, he could fight the shark and kill it easily. However, blood might attract more sharks, and if they were also at the half-immortal stage, he would be in trouble. Like it or not, Michael was in their home ground. Besides, he wanted to reach his destination without wasting his energy. After all, who knew how many enemies he would have to face there? Michael slowly swam away from the shipwreck and the shark without making any sound. Finally, when he put a safe distance between him and the shark, a swarm of shining goldfish coiled and winded their way past. They lit the underwater like a swarm of fireflies, sending glints of light in every direction. On the golden sand, oysters and colorful shells were scattered everywhere. They were a living explosion of beauty. Limpets glued themselves to rocks, setting themselves in like jewels in a necklace. Michael scooped up a shell from the sand and put it in the system storage as a souvenir. Eventually, an archway appeared in his sight. It was definitely man-made and contained a realm tear in the center. Unlike the emerald green realm tear that served as the entrance to the demon's grave, this realm tear radiated an icy blue light. Michael's eyes were lit with excitement. If everything went according to his plan, he could put an end to their financial blunder. Even the god of darkness depended on gold coins to grow his army and build his castle. Michael flapped his legs, dashing toward the realm tear. He was actually surprised, but it made sense. The realm tear made him realize the things he needed were in another realm. A realm within a realm. This place keeps surprising me, Michael said to himself as he tried to enter through the realm tear. But an invisible force pushed him away. What the hell? Michael creased his brows. What happened? I asked Michael wordlessly. Unlike Michael, Vidora felt no resistance from the realm tear. Once again, Michael moved toward the realm tear, and this time, he resisted the force. Michael quickly used his X-ray vision to see an energy dome around the archway. Michael unsheathed his dark swords. Then, he swung the swords, cutting the invisible dome. The dark swords cut through the dome. It produced a powerful shock wave that pushed both Vidora and Michael several meters away. Then, the realm tear created a suction force that pulled Michael and Vidora along with gallons of lake water. Everything around Michael turned dark. But before he disappeared into the realm tear, he caught Vidora and held them closer to his chest with one hand and the dark sword in the other. Lights out for Michael for a few minutes. Even his X-ray vision turned out to be useless. He felt like he was flying through space. At least the feeling was familiar. After an unknown amount of time, Michael was thrown onto a soft ground. He coughed up the blood and slowly opened his eyes. His eyes adjusted to the light. Everything looked blurry for a few moments. When Michael was finally able to see his surroundings, he was taken aback by surprise. He was on a mountain cliff, overlooking the massive cliffs and towering fjords that crept through the rainforest. Great scarves of cloud swirled around the blue sky. It was a primeval landscape, vast and forbidding. But this wasn't how Michael would describe the place. To him, this realm was magical, like a fairy tale land. The trees were alien, and most of the realm looked too cyan. There were waterfalls, rivers, and distant flocks of winged creatures. What is this place? Vidora asked Michael. They shared the same dumbfounded look on Michael's face. That's weird, said Sarba. His gaze was locked on Michael's dark sword in his hand. When Michael looked at the sword, he saw no red lightning bolts. But that wasn't the only change Michael noticed. He couldn't feel any energy in the atmosphere. In other words, his cultivation power had betrayed him. Luckily, Michael could still access the system and use the arch-energy crystals to power himself up. Our god has appeared. Suddenly, Michael heard a thunderous voice in the distance. Somehow, Michael didn't think it was just a coincidence. Soon, a flock of winged creatures shot to the sky through the rainforest. They were on their way to Michael. Chapter 8:18. The Wood Elves and the World of Itenes. The world of Itenes was primitive and inhabited by a race called Zoralines. They were later named the Wood Elves by the Dark Lord. Although the world was affected by the time array when the Dark Lord reset the universe, there were still some remnants of the Dark Lord in Aitnes. They worshipped him as their only god. Until 2 years ago, the Wood Elves lived peacefully without major wars. However, everything changed one day. The barrier that kept Aitnes hidden from the outside world broke as the soldiers of Sky Hall invaded their world and slaughtered thousands of Wood Elves. The Wood Elves fought the Sky Hall army with primitive bows and arrows, while the Sky Hall used high-powered weapons such as cannons, trebuchets, and wyverns. At that moment, Tazkin, a young warrior from the Forest tribe, was risking his life to steal medicine for the wounded villagers and his teammates back home. He was accompanied by his wife, Thilv, and 4 comrades. The Wood Elves called the Sky Hall soldiers by the name demons since they brought death and destruction wherever they went. Like most of the Wood Elves, Tazkin had coppery skin and hazel eyes. His hair was jet black with a hue of copper red. Compared to the elves and dark elves, Wood Elves were slightly taller and had pointier ears. Contrary to those elves, Wood Elves were kind and friendly. They would have formed an alliance with Sky Hall and happily offered them valuable resources if Sky Hall chose the path of diplomacy. But no, Sky Hall waged war and slaughtered thousands of them without a shred of mercy. All of those deaths and destruction were for the natural resources Aitnes possessed. This world was once treasured by the Dark Lord himself, and Sky Hall had no clue the Dark Lord was on his way to save the world from them. Tazkin and his group were walking through a bluish, ancient forest. It reeked of age. Its woody incense was from centuries of snapping branches crashing to the forest's floor and rotting silently. The composting, organic smell rose up in waves like a miasma. Every sprawling tree they passed under reminded Tazkin of a watchful guardian, a silent sentinel of the groves. Tazkin and his team used branches and veins to traverse through the forest without making a noise. They knew the forest like the back of their hand. The Sky Hall soldiers used contraptions to traverse through the forest when they were in a good mood. Otherwise, they would burn down everything in their path just to travel hundreds of meters into the forest. Hundreds of ancient trees with unlimited potential turned to ashes in their hands. Tazkin and his team were on their way to the forest center, where the mother tree was. The mother tree was the oldest in the world, spanning hundreds of acres. The Wood Elves had a ritual of climbing the mother tree, which would take months. Countless Wood Elves lost their lives trying to reach the top. The Wood Elves believed they could get the mother tree's blessing and hear their god's voice by reaching the top. The deeper Tazkin and his team went, the more mystical and spellbinding the forest became. Huge roots spread-eagled the ground, twisting like the great backs of sea dinosaurs. The foliage became thick and lush, forming an arch of fairy-tale sapphire blue above their heads. Arthritic boughs, gnarled with age, dripped their bounty of nuts onto the path. Briars, brambles, and berry trees flanked the trail, making it impenetrable on either side. Shuffling noises came from deep in the interior, deadened by the cunningly woven web of leaves. A troop of winged badgers crossed the winding trail in front of them at one point. They were finishing up their early morning foraging and looked startled to see the Wood Elves. As if on cue, a blue featherbird erupted from the knot of trees. Soon, a few more of its beaked companions joined the flock, creating a symphony of song. The heart-haunting melody was an elixir for the soul. Their melody used to soothe the Wood Elves' souls. But after the demons appeared, these birds cried more often than they sang. Despite the ash and smell of blood in the air, the sap-sweet fragrance of the forest washed over them. Finally, Tazkin arrived at a wide glade, where the ancient trees fell away, revealing the bespeckled blue sky. The last of the morning stars were glinting like silver earrings, luminous and bright. An orgold moon with a blue ring hung quietly in the distance, casting a honeyed sheen over the trees. Tazkin and his men sat their backs against a lightning-blasted tree trunk and watched the demon castle in the distance. The demons scorched hundreds of trees, and everything lived in the area to build their castle and the surrounding buildings. Tazkin could still hear the cries of his people when the demons first arrived. They built the castle with the wood they got from the mother tree's branches and the roots as defensive walls. Once, a holy site turned into a burial site for thousands of Wood Elves. Since the Sky Hall sent a total of 1,000 soldiers, they were able to build a castle in a month. The castle had 11 broad, square towers connected by large, thin walls made of blue marble stones they mined in Aitnes. To mine those stones, the Sky Hall slaughtered an entire tribe that protected and lived in the mines for centuries. Small windows were scattered generously around the walls in seemingly perfect symmetry, along with symmetric crenellations for archers and artillery to shoot down the wood elves who dared to get near the mother tree. A huge gate with heavy metal doors guarded the castle. It was the only easy way in. Any other side would be futile. Various barracks, camps, and small buildings were scattered outside the castle gates. The soldiers and some of the merchants who were related to Sky Hall elders lived in those buildings. Taskin and his men had no idea who lives in the castle, as none of them stepped into the castle. This castle was the most protected place in the entire world. Daring to invade the castle would only result in certain earth. Luckily, Taskin and their men had no need to go into the castle. Instead, their target was one of the infirmary buildings where the Sky Hall soldiers kept healing potions. "We should wait for the nightfall and then strike," Vaikok, one of Taskin's men, suggested, only to see Thilv shake her head. "We don't have time. They need those magical potions ASAP," Taskin nodded. "She is right. Time is not in our favor." "It's now or never," said Taskin. His voice betrayed him, showing his uncertainty and worry about the plan. Deep down, Taskin knew attacking the demons in broad daylight was nothing short of suicide. Still, they had to do it for the sake of their people. 50 lives depended on them and the magical potions. Taskin's men sighed. Although they all knew the plan was suicidal, they would follow Taskin to hell itself. After all, if it weren't for Taskin's leadership, they would have died along with thousands of other wood elves when the demons first invaded them. Moreover, Taskin was the only wood elf who managed to kill one of the demon generals and steal one of their weapon shipments. Unfortunately, the wood elves lacked the technical knowledge to assemble the weapon to its full form. "Vaikok, go and scout the area ahead. Do not get caught," said Taskin. Vaikok, the brown-haired wooden elf, nodded and slowly crouched forward. As the team scout, recon was his job. Hugging the tree, Vaikok slid down to the ground like a monkey. He used the foliage to his advantage. But there was no foliage once he entered the castle land. The Sky Hall soldiers knew how the wood elves operated. Steel was the one and only advantage the wood elves had over them. Therefore, the Sky Hall soldiers cut down everything, including trees and bushes, around the castle. Vaikok used the huts and buildings to hide and walk around. He took a mental note of how many soldiers and the paths of their patrol. Meanwhile, Taskin, his wife and the 3 other wood elves waited for Taskin to return. Suddenly, they heard a loud explosion near the castle. Black smoke rose through one of the castle towers. "By the name of the Dark Lord, what is that?" "Must be one of their new weapons," Thilv gritted her teeth. "Once the Dark Lord's blessing returns to our people, we will pay them back several folds," said Thilv. "No god came to our aid when they slaughtered our people, Thilv. If we want to change our fate, we have to fight for it," rebuked Taskin. "Do not speak like that, Taskin. We must pray to the Dark Lord when the time of our needs. He will definitely answer our prayers." Taskin did not want to argue with his wife. The Wood Elves were a god-fearing race that worshipped the Dark Lord for thousands of years. They didn't see him, but they worshipped his statues, which protected them for centuries. However, after the demons invaded them and slaughtered thousands, some of the Wood Elves like Taskin lost their trust in the Dark Lord. One couldn't blame them for losing faith in a higher power after witnessing their race being pushed to the brink of extinction. Taskin had no faith in a god who didn't raise a finger against the demons, unlike his wife. Eventually, Vaikok finished his recon and returned to them. 20 fully armored guards on the way to the infirmary, Vaikok reported back to Taskin. "Did you see the healing potions?" asked Thilv as Vaikok nodded. But he didn't have any excitement or even the slightest joy in his eyes. Instead, Vaikok seemed like something had affected him deeply. "What did you see, Vaikok?" "He is here, Taskin," said Vaikok with a grave tone. His eyes contained fear and worry like never before. "General Tar?" asked Taskin as the others looked terrified except for Thilv, whose eyes burned with rage and bloodlust. "Report said he was looking for something in the mines." Taskin creased his brows. This mission got a whole lot tougher with Tar being on the castle ground. If this were any other day, Taskin would have opted to back off. But today, he must retrieve those potions. His brother's life depended on the healing potion. Chapter 819. General Tar was an orc assigned by the Sky Hall to build the castle and pacify the locals in Itenes. Unlike a typical orc, Tar was a war-hungry death merchant who preferred to kill than ask questions. Single-handed, Tar killed thousands of wood elves. Taskin and Tar had a bit of history between them. After the Sky Hall invaded the Wood Elves, Taskin fought Tar to rescue his team and actually managed to achieve such an impossible task. Moreover, Taskin gave a scar that Tar still hadn't forgotten. But unlike Tar, Taskin didn't thirst for a rematch. Instead, Taskin only wanted to steal the healing potions and get the hell out of this place. "Follow my lead," said Vaikok. "Vaikok, you know the way." "Take the lead," said Taskin. The Wood Elves climbed down the trees and headed toward the infirmary. They moved as nimble as the wind itself. One could barely hear their footsteps. The armored soldiers' heavy boots' clunking sound masked Taskin and his men's movements. Step by step, the Wood Elves moved closer to the encampments. Soon, Taskin noticed a demon armed to the teeth patrolling between the two camps. Some of the soldiers were sleeping in each camp. This armored soldier turned around and stood between the camps for a few moments. He seemed exhausted after walking back and forth wearing the heavy armor. Outside Itenes, they had arch energy and were powerful enough to lift even boulders. Hence, wearing armor was no headache for them. Besides, they could achieve more protection with a spell instead of this armor. The Sky Hall soldier sweated bullets inside the metal armor. Taskin slowly took out the bow hanging on his back. He nocked an arrow and aimed for the gap between the soldier's helmet and shoulder. After taking a deep breath, Taskin released the arrow. "Girh!" The metal soldier groaned as Thilv grabbed the soldier before he hit the ground. If he fell down, the metal armor would make a sound loud enough to wake the soldiers sleeping inside the camps. While dragging the soldier back, Thilv unsheathed a crude dagger and plunged it near the arrow, and ended the soldier's life instantly. She then cautiously placed the body on the ground without making a noise. "Let's go," Vaikok whispered as the group moved around the camps. "Where are the potions?" asked Taskin. Vaikok pointed his finger at a wooden building across several camps and soldiers. Fortunately, Vaikok was able to sneak closer to the building using the tents as his cover. Since the Sky Hall soldiers patrolled the area like clockwork, Taskin and his men were confident enough to sneak past them. But the only complication was General Tar and his wolves. These wolves were specially bred to track down Wood Elves and their tribes. Each wolf was ferocious enough to rip a Wood Elf apart in a few moments. Just thinking about the wolves, Taskin's shoulder ached. He looked at the deep claw mark on his right shoulder for a moment before following Vaikok behind. One by one, Taskin and his men moved past the camps. For some reason, it didn't feel right to Taskin. Not a single soldier spotted them, as things went pretty smoothly. But that was what worried Taskin. Vaikok halted his steps behind a wooden building, taking advantage of the shade provided by the roof. The team stopped for a few moments to catch their breath. "Something's bothering you, my love." Thilv turned her gaze at Taskin. The dark lines on his forehead betrayed how worried he was. "Everything's going smooth. Too smooth, to be exact," said Taskin. His words surprised Vaikok and the others. As far as they were concerned, if anything, Taskin should feel grateful that everything was going in their favor. Instead, Taskin looked worried to the core. Taskin sighed, looking at their confused faces. "Not to jinx things, but when was the last time everything went according to our plan? Those demons always pulled one over us whenever we thought we had them cornered," said Taskin. "I understand how you feel. But this is not the time for second thoughts. We are deep within the belly of the beast. If we don't get those potions, people are going to die," Thilv said in a low-pitched voice. She cared more for her people than anyone, including Taskin. Unlike her, Taskin wasn't born into her tribe. On the contrary, Taskin was an orphan. Thilv's uncle found him in the forest and raised him as his own. They fell in love at a young age, and Taskin had to climb the top of the mother tree to get Thilv's father's blessing to marry Thilv. Taskin was one of the few who managed to complete such a task and lived to tell tales about it. Taskin nodded, pushing all the doubts and uncertainties to the back of his mind. This was no time for second-guessing, as Thilv said. To their sake, Taskin had to look confident even though he wasn't. He signaled Vaikok to lead the way with his eyes as the Wood Elf slowly walked around the building. Suddenly, a loud bell rang from the castle. Their bodies went rigid, thinking they were caught for a moment. Midday break. "Come on, everyone. Take 5. They heard someone calling the soldiers from the center of the camps. Luckily, the soldiers were moving to the center to get their bellies filled. As a result, the patrol routes turned empty and gave Taskin and his men enough leeway to get into the infirmary, take the potions, and disappear into the forest without alerting Tar. At least, that's what they planned. In a few minutes, almost every soldier in the area went to the center and formed a circle around a giant cauldron with boiling porridge in it. Meanwhile, the wood elves hastened their steps. They crouched toward the infirmary as fast as they could. Finally, they came to a wooden building with a board with a leaf symbol hanging above the door. Taskin slowly opened the door after looking back and forth. When the door slowly opened, they saw a couple of soldiers sleeping on white beds. These soldiers seemed pale, shivering and gritting their teeth as though they were in great pain. While Taskin's gaze was locked on the sick soldiers, Thilv and the others noticed the crate full of glistening green vials. There it is. Vaycock closed the door behind them and pointed at the crate. Let's take it and get the hell out of this place, another wood elf behind Thilv said. When Thilv was about to take a step toward the crate, Taskin stopped her by her wrist. If they have the magical healing potions, why do these soldiers look sick? Asked Taskin. As much as the Thilv and the others wanted to take the healing potions and escape the place, Taskin's words made them wonder and think deeply about what he had just said. Vaycock and the others creased their brows. They knew Taskin was right. These magical healing potions could cure anything. Yet these soldiers looked anything but healthy. On top of that, the healing potions were right on the table, and the crate contained enough potions for all the soldiers in the room. Yet, for some reason, the demons chose not to give the potions to their comrades. We can think about it when we get back to the tribe. Let's just take them and get the hell out of here, Vaycock rushed Taskin. Seeing no other choice, Thilv quickly dashed to the crate and took it in her hand. On her way back, she wanted to kill the sick soldiers. But luckily for them, Thilv prioritized escaping the place over slitting their throats. Taskin turned around to leave the building. He threw one last gaze over his shoulder at the soldiers before opening the door. The moment he opened the door, Taskin's body went rigid. His heart almost jumped out of his chest. To their shock, General Tar was waiting outside to welcome them with his 5 gray wolves. General Tar was a brutish, aggressive, ugly, and malevolent orc, contrasting with the wood elves. He had several piercings all over his body and wore a necklace made of his enemies' ears. He held a heavy sword as tall as an average human on his shoulder. When General Tar saw Taskin and his team, he showed an ugly smile that really highlighted his blood-stained teeth and the tusks sticking out of his mouth. The gray wolves bore their teeth with their blue eyes glimmering with ferocity. They were one signal away from ripping Taskin and the others apart. Each wolf was 5 feet wide and tall as a wood elf's waist. Saliva trickled down their mouths as though Taskin and his men were juicy pieces of meat. To what do I owe the pleasure of this visit? General Tar had a perfect brutish voice for his monstrous body. He slowly ran his hand through the deep scar on his left cheek. Tar almost went blind in one eye. If Taskin swung the sword a few inches higher and Tar would have lost his left eye. Tar wore the scar as a symbol of shame. Until he could wash his face with Taskin's blood, Tar had no plans to rest easy. General Tar, Taskin stopped in front of his men, shielding them with his body. The soldiers behind Tar raised their swords and handheld crossbows at Taskin. Tar's men were in the number hundreds, while Taskin only had 5 men. No matter what strategy they used, there was no chance for them to win this battle. You gave me something to remember you by. It's only fair I return the favor. Don't you think so, men? General Tar asked. Yes, General, Tar's men shouted in unison as Tar brought down the heavy sword to the ground from his shoulder. It seems like our friends are here to take the healing potions meant for our men, said Tar. We can't have you take what's ours unless, Tar's words trailed. Unless what? Thilv snarled. Unless Taskin bests me in a duel, Tar said, looking Taskin in the eyes. But you always have the option to run away. In that case, my babies will be more than happy to give a chase. You have 3 seconds to decide, Tar raised 3 fingers. 1, 2. I accept, Taskin stepped forward, having no other choices. Outrunning the wolves and the soldiers was nothing but suicide. At least by fighting Tar, he could pull a surprise move on Tar that might let his wife escape the place. Chapter 820. Michael being a god. When Michael heard the echo in the distance, he was surprised. Soon, many figures riding winged beasts appeared on the horizon. These beasts resembled giant butterflies. Having no idea what was happening in the world, Michael remained on the hilltop, waiting for the figures to come to him. While they were flying toward him, Michael accessed the system storage and took out the cultivation device. After a long thought, Michael named these devices Olympus. He wore the Olympus around his wrist and willed the system to use the refined arch energy crystals in the storage. Olympus warmed up slightly as the black device tightened around his wrist. Soon, Michael felt a surge of energy within his body. These refined arch energy crystals boosted his cultivation power to the core formation level. In a world without energy, a core formation warrior would be a god. Eventually, the giant butterflies descended down to the hilltop, revealing their riders. To Michael's surprise, those who rode the butterflies looked similar to the elves but had brownish skin and pointier ears. Furthermore, they looked primitive. The men wore a piece of a dress made of various leaves around their wrists, covering their manhood, while the women wore leaves covering their breasts and womanhood. Still, the dress made of leaves barely covered them. Even the bows and arrows they had looked ancient and primal. As soon as the wood elves saw Michael, they screamed and raised their hands to the sky. Their eyes were filled with disbelief and shock. They quickly jumped to the mountaintop from the mount and knelt before Michael. Michael saw them knocking their heads against the ground like they were asking for forgiveness. "This isn't the welcome I expected," Saba whispered. Michael shared the same thought. The wood elves bent their knees and went on with the ground. They didn't even dare to look him in the eyes. He turned his gaze to the elder elf, who wore some kind of hat with feathers and held a staff. With a hunchback and a staff to hold his body straight, the old elf looked like a typical village elder who was wise and old. "Dark Lord," the old elf's voice stuttered. It was not because of his old age but because of the respect and fear he had toward the Dark Lord. The old man trembled even to raise his head before Michael. At that moment, almost 30 wood elves and their mountains knelt before Michael, waiting for him to speak. Since Michael was caught off guard by the god thing in another world, it took him a few moments to find his next words. Never in a million years did Michael think he would find an entirely new world with elves who worship him as their god. "All right. Everyone stand up," Michael ordered them. The village elder and the other wood elves almost immediately rose to their feet as though they were programmed to obey every one of his commands. Tears gushed out of the village elder's eyes. Even some of the male wood elves sobbed with joy and delight. But deep within their eyes, Michael saw the desperation for help. Some of the elves had deep scars and wounds still covered with green paste. Those marks were perfectly straight, like a sword cut or a spear slash. Michael knew without a doubt that these elves were fighting someone. Judging by their weapons and clothes, anyone with a sword and better armor could slaughter these elves. So unless the elves were fighting unarmed goblins, they had no chance of winning the fight. The old elf tried to remain straight with the help of his staff. "I knew you would answer our prayers, Dark Lord," the old elf said, sobbing uncontrollably. Tears gushed out of the old elf's eyes. Michael pretty much had no idea what was happening. But he took a deep breath and decided to deal with the wood elves, who seemed to worship him with every fiber of their bodies. Even the members of his dark army didn't look as loyal and faithful as these wood elves. Suddenly, Michael heard a thunderous scream in the distance. Suddenly, a red smoke rose to the sky through the forest. The place where the red smoke was coming from was the same place these elves came from. "What is that?" asked Michael, moving his gaze to the red smoke in the distance. "Call for help, Dark Lord," the old elf answered. Intense fear glistened in his old eyes. "We should try helping them. These elves seem desperate," Iag whispered in Michael's ears. Among the 3 heads, Iag was the least merciful one. But even she felt pity for the elves and wanted to help them. Michael was not going to ignore them when they seemed to worship him as a god. They were like the Dark Army, only more loyal and faithful. "Then I should answer the call for help." Michael slowly ascended into the air as the elves gasped in shock. Their faces went pale. The village elder looked like he was about to have a heart attack. "Lead the way," said Michael, hovering in the air. It took a few moments for the elves to snap back to reality. Then they climbed onto their mounts and flew toward the red smoke. On their way, they stared at Michael with awe and disbelief. Their expressions were beyond words. On the other hand, Michael was in love with this new world. Everywhere he turned, he saw lush forests with magical birds and sapphire blue trees that glowed like neon lights. The air smelled fresher than any other cultivation continent. Magical was the word that appeared in his mind when looking at the world. The golden butterflies flew through the air like fancy kites. The butterfly with the elder on top flew relatively close to Michael, and eventually, a cozy village built on top of the trees appeared in Michael's sight. Michael was in awe, wondering how these elves managed to build a village around the trees above the ground. The tree houses he saw when he visited the dark elves were a far cry from this village. Through the giant blue trees, Michael vaguely saw a giant wooden pillar where the wood elves gathered around. The source of this content is nov/l/bin. /net. Little wood elves bounced up and down, waving their hands, seeing the butterflies in the air. The grown-ups, however, looked tense and clenched their hands together against their chests. They were praying for their god to return. Through the canopy, Michael descended to the ground. Countless wood elves gasped and cried out loud. Just like the village elder and the wood elves accompanied him, the villagers dropped to their knees immediately after seeing Michael. "Our God has answered our prayers. We are saved. Dark Lord," the villagers shouted out loud. Looking at them, Michael couldn't help wondering how they quickly identified him as their god. But he soon got his answer when Sarba asked him to turn around. "You should see this," Michael heard Sarba's startled voice. As he slowly turned around, he saw a wooden carving of a man in the tall wood pillar. Although the features were not precise, he resembled Michael. The two swords on his back and the hydra on his shoulder were dead giveaway. He turned his back on the wood elves and stared at the wood carving for a few minutes. The wood elves didn't dare to utter a word. As a result, silence returned to the place. Strangely, the carving's eyes were radiating a dim light. When he looked closer into the eyes, Michael noticed a rune in each eye. It was so tiny that an average human or a wood elf wouldn't notice. Finally, Michael turned around to greet the wood elves and hear why they called for help. "You!" Michael's gaze swept across the wood elves and landed on the village elder. The village elder raised his head to look Michael in the eyes. "Stand up," said Michael. "What's your name?" Michael asked the elder. "Kirot, Dark Lord," the village elder answered with the utmost respect and reverence toward Michael. Michael nodded, flicking his wrist as the throne made of skulls and bones materialized behind Michael. He sat down and put one leg atop the other. The wood elves were once again startled by a simple act such as this. To the wood elves who grew up without arch-energy or cultivation, everything Michael did was nothing short of a miracle. "Now tell me why you called for help," Michael asked Kirot. "The demons, Dark Lord. We are failing in the fight against the demons." "Demons?" Michael and Vidora were stunned by Kirot's answer. They immediately thought of Azazel and his race. But Michael was skeptical about the demon thing. He never thought the wood elves named the Sky Hall soldiers the demons. To be honest, the wood elves didn't even know there was a separate race called demons that existed in the universe. "Are these demons here to punish us because of something we did or didn't do, Dark Lord? Are you punishing your children?" Michael almost coughed up blood after hearing the elder address themselves as the children. But he had to keep a straight face and go along with this. After all, godhood did come up with some quirks like this. Besides, it didn't seem like a good idea for them to tell the wood elves the truth about the universe. Instead, Michael planned to be their beloved god. This way, Michael would have an entire population working for him, collecting everything he needs and being loyal to him in exchange for protection. "How long have you been fighting these demons?" Surprisingly, Cain questioned the elder for some reason. Since 2 years ago, Lord Cain, the elder surprised Michael by addressing Cain using his realm name. Moreover, he came to this world 2 years ago. It seemed like the demon attack and his appearance had some kind of connection. "How do they know our name?" Ayag whispered into Michael's ears. "And demons? Are they really fighting the demons?" asked Saba. Suddenly, Michael sensed someone rushing toward them in his environment scanning. When he looked over the crowd of wood elves, he saw a wood elven woman land on the wood platform using a rope lift mechanism. "We have to save Tazkin," the woman said before collapsing down. Chapter 821. God to the Rescue, Thilv. Michael heard a wood elf cry out loud. Still, the wood elf, and who seemed to be his wife, didn't dare to move without Michael's permission. It was obvious the wood elf who just fainted due to probably blood loss was their loved one. But instead of rushing to her aid, the couple looked at Michael with eyes pleading for mercy. "Kirot, bring her to me," Michael ordered the village elder. The wood elf old man immediately signaled Thilv's parents as they carried Thilv to Michael. The man who carried the woman had a muscular body with several scars, while his wife looked gentle and kind. They both sobbed, seeing the sorry state of their daughter. Thilv had several deep claw marks on her back and a deep stab wound on the side of her chest. Blood spurted out of her wounds, resulting in her body looking pale. Kirat and the Wood Elves placed Thilv on Michael's feet and knelt before him. "Dark Lord, please save our daughter," they cried out loud. Michael stood up from this throne and took a few steps toward the wounded Wood Elf. He sat beside her before taking out a sparkling healing potion. Under the Wood Elf's shocked gazes, he gently opened Thilv's mouth and poured the healing potion into her mouth. The Wood Elves were no strangers to the healing potions. They saw the Sky Hall soldiers use these potions on a battlefield to heal themselves completely. It was one of the many reasons why the Wood Elves got decimated mercilessly by the demons. The wounds on Thilv's body magically disappeared under their gazes. Her hands twitched slightly as she slowly regained consciousness. Any other normal healing potions would have failed to save her because of the blood loss. But Michael gave her one from his personal stash, which could supplement her blood loss and heal her completely. Ack! Suddenly, Thilv rose up from the floor, gasping for air. It took her vision a few seconds to adjust to the new sight. When everything cleared up, she saw a strange face looking at her. She immediately tried to crawl back and reach for her dagger in utter shock, but Kirat and her parents grabbed her by her hands. "Thilv! Thank the Dark Lord. The source of this content is nov/l/bin/net, my precious." Thilv's mother and father embraced her tightly as the entire tribe looked stunned by Michael's mercy. Michael returned to his throne, letting the family have some warm moments, although he doubted this would last, judging by the wounds on her body. Thilv hugged her parents tight as she sobbed uncontrollably. A few minutes later, Kirat and her parents dropped a nuke on her head. Thilv's face paled when her gaze fell on Michael. The god she had prayed for since she was a little kid was sitting before her. Not a single day passed without Thilv praying to the Dark Lord. It was her true wish that the Dark Lord would appear in front of her one day. But she didn't know it would actually happen. The Dark Lord looked more imposing and radiant than the wood carving. Her heart almost jumped out of her chest when he smiled at her. As much as Thilv wanted to grab his feet and cry out loud, she didn't have time to do so. Taskin was fighting Tar as they spoke. He and her comrades risked their life so she could escape. Realization hit her as the Dark Lord may be the only person who could save her husband. Hence, she dashed at the Dark Lord and dropped to her knees before Michael. She looked up with her hands clenched against her chest. "Please save my husband, Dark Lord." Michael guessed she might put a request like that after he saw the wounds. Luckily for the Wood Elves, Michael decided to help them. Plus, he was curious to see these demons they talked about. These people had been worshipping him, so the least he could do was help them get some peace. Besides, he felt like it was his duty to protect these people. Perhaps it was their loyalty or the fact they worshipped him, but he wanted to help them. Michael unsheathed a dark sword as the Wood Elves took a step back. They trembled at the sight of Michael's black sword. He dropped it to the ground and rose from his throne. Thilv still remained at his feet, begging for his help. He stepped on the sword and turned his gaze down on her. "Step onto the sword and hold my hand tight." At first, Thilv was confused but eventually did as she was told. After all, she had no time to waste, and her god had ordered her to climb on the sword. "Dark Lord, please allow us to accompany you," said Kirat, only to see Michael shake his head. "No need. I will be back soon." As he said, the black sword slowly ascended into the air, carrying Michael and Thilv. But before Michael could shoot into the air, Vidora made a request to Michael. "We'd like to stay with the villagers." Although Michael was surprised, he didn't see any harm in leaving Vidora with the Wood Elves. Michael nodded as Vidora jumped back to his throne. After leaving Vidora on the throne, Michael flew straight through the canopy to the sky. Thilv let out a squeal as she grabbed Michael's hands tight. When he rose to the air, Michael saw a colossal tree in the distance. Even the giant bull he saw in the demon's grave would look small in front of this tree. The black smoke rising from the ground near the tree and the castle looked out of place to Michael. Even from afar, Michael could smell the metal and pollution in the air. For a few moments, Michael stopped flying and looked around the world. His blood boiled when he saw countless forest fires and dark smoke rising to the sky. Only a fool would think they happened naturally. He knew that whoever built the castle near the mother tree was responsible for all the destruction. He could only imagine how many precious plants and wildlife the fire had engulfed. Such a waste of resources and destruction of nature raised his killing intent to another level. "You might want to hold me tighter," said Michael. Thilv nodded as she grabbed his hands tighter than before. Suddenly, everything around her blurred. Her face ached because of the speed. It was a miracle her leaf dress remained intact when she appeared directly above the encampments, where she saw Taskin and others bleeding to their deaths on the ground. There they are. Thilv pointed her fingers at the ground. To Michael's surprise, an orc was beating the life out of some wood elves. But when he looked closer at the soldiers, he was disappointed and surprised at the same time. The reason for his disappointment was they weren't demons but elves and humans in metal armor. On the ground, Taskin and his men tried to pick themselves up, but Tar had broken their legs with a wooden club. When the duel between Tar and Taskin began, the orc used a pill to enhance his strength to ensure his victory against Taskin. A fair duel would have gone in Taskin's favor, but it was far from a fair duel. At least Taskin managed to use a primitive smoke bomb that blinded Tar and his men temporarily, which gave Thilv enough time to escape into the forest. However, the Skyhall soldiers and the wolves managed almost to kill her. Luckily, they didn't know the forest like Thilv knew. Now, Taskin and his men just hoped Thilv escaped to the tribe. They didn't even want backup because sending backup to save them was equal to sending the wood elves to their death. Taskin's legs looked crooked as Tar slowly walked toward him. The ugly orc had an even uglier smile on his face. Suddenly out of nowhere, a bolt of lightning struck the ground between him and Taskin. Only then did these Skyhall soldiers look up at the sky. When they realized what just had happened, Michael landed on the ground, creating a shock wave that sent the orc flying away. The Skyhall soldiers were terrified as the dark sword slowly descended to the ground carrying Thilv. Give these to them. Michael threw a bunch of healing potions to Thilv like they were candies. Taskin! She cried out loud as she dashed at Taskin. His face was swollen and almost unrecognizable. Because she was with the Dark Lord, Thilv had no fear in her heart. Meanwhile, the Skyhall soldiers looked tense. Before they could react, Michael dashed at Tar. The big ugly orc was trying to pick himself up. Instead of waiting for the orc to stand up, Michael grabbed him by his head and cast the cloud of darkness and death range. The area immediately grew darker, which terrified the soldiers around Michael. The orc groaned. His big green eyes were filled with shock. Without giving the orc any time to retaliate, Michael cast the Soul Eater. Michael could have easily returned the favor by beating the crap out of the orc, but he chose to kill the orc quickly to show his overwhelming powers. After all, Michael had the reputation of a god to protect. The dark smoke shrouded the orc as everyone heard the orc's sickening cry of agonizing pain. His scream echoed through the lands. Soon, the Skyhall soldiers noticed a bright smoke leaving Tar's eyes and going into Michael's mouth. The orc's once bulky monstrous body shriveled under their shocked gazes. When Michael let go of the orc, Tar looked more like a mummy than an orc. Taskin and the others couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Who is he? Taskin asked with a stuttering voice. Everything that happened before his eyes was nothing short of a miracle. He even thought this was just a dream. Meanwhile, the Skyhall soldiers lost the color of their faces behind the helmets. Some of them outright fell to the ground due to the cloud of darkness effects. Michael slowly turned his gaze to the Skyhall soldiers. Black lightning crackled around his arms, threatening to strike every single soldier in the area. Shall we begin? Michael's words swept across the land and put the fear of God in their hearts. Chapter 822. God's Wrath. The Skyhall soldiers who received the name demons from the Wood Elves took a step back. Their eyes shimmered with fear behind their helmets. Michael cracked his finger one by one. His movements were slow but contained deep hatred and killing intent. Despite the morning sun and its brightness, the place darkened when he cast the death range. Michael was already at core formation level 2 because of the Olympus, as the death range boosted his cultivation 4 levels high. Taskin and the others felt a chill running down their spines just by hearing the crackling lightning bolts dancing around Michael. The dark sword on the ground slowly ascended into the air and landed in Michael's hands. As though the sword had sensed Michael's killing lust, it produced a myriad of lightning bolts. In the darkness, the dark swords radiated a dim red light because of the lightning bolts. The Skyhall soldiers were stupefied. They were literally in the dark, having no clue how Michael was using spells and arch-energy in Itonese. These soldiers were at the bottom of the Skyhall hierarchy. Hence, they received no artifacts or scrolls that could have helped them escape Michael's wrath. The only option they had was the portal within the castle. But they doubted they would be able to move past him. Kill him, Dark Lord! Thilv shouted like a wounded beast thirsting for payback. The others were too stunned after hearing the human before them was their god. Even Tazkin began regaining faith in their god, the Dark Lord. Michael slowly raised his sword toward the sky as the clear sky immediately darkened. Storm clouds as gray as ash came out of thin air, followed by rumbling thunder. Flashes of lightning struck across the sky, indicating the upcoming bloodbath. Then, hundreds of black lightning bolts struck the ground. Thilv and the others quickly closed their eyes instinctively. Soon, they heard screams and felt the electricity in the air. Their neck hair stood up as they tasted blood and metal in the air. The lightning storm continued to strike down, slaughtering the soldiers on the ground. Hundreds of lives were snuffed out in a few minutes. All that remained on the ground was hollow, melted armor, scorched bones, and bits and pieces of the Sky Hall soldiers. When Thilv opened her eyes, she couldn't believe her eyes. It took her brain a few moments to process everything that happened. They learned from the village elder that the Dark Lord was a vengeful god, and he lived up to their expectation and more. Gradually, the darkness faded away, letting the sun bathe the ground with its brightness. In the light, the ground looked more terrifying. The ground was littered with the Sky Hall soldiers' remains. Michael was happy with the output. These soldiers deserved no mercy nor the right to breathe another day in this beautiful world that belonged to him. Michael turned his gaze back to Thilv and the men. Collect the armor and their weapons, Michael ordered the wood elves. Their bodies moved without their consent like robots. With their nimble fingers and hands, they plucked the weapons and armor left behind by the Sky Hall soldiers. Most of the armor was melted, just like their weapons. The lightning storm did a number on them. But to a talented blacksmith like Michael, it was not a big deal for him to repair the armor and weapons. The first and foremost thing on his to-do list was fixing the clothing issue. He couldn't have his future army of wood elves running around, looking like primitive monkeys. Michael was about to head toward the castle when he heard angry growls from behind. The wood elves froze as Michael turned back to see 4 wolves baring their teeth. The wolves were completely stupid and oblivious to the fact Michael could kill them with a flick of his wrist. "Hey kitty," Michael teased the wolves. Step by step, the wolves approached Michael. They surrounded Michael to pounce him from every direction. Suddenly, the wolves leaped at Michael. Then, the wood elves saw a ring of dark flames like they had never seen before pulsating from Michael. The dark flames reduced the wolves to ash as their bones crumbled down to the ground before they could reach Michael. He could have killed them using varieties of ways. Some of them were really creative and brutal. But Michael chose to kill the soldiers using the fastest way to show his overwhelming power to the wood elves. He wanted them to witness his power so they would continue to worship him and serve him loyally to their last breath. In exchange, he would protect this world and the residents as he was meant to be. Michael then looked at the sky. For some reason, he felt like his past self was smiling at him. Leaving the wood elves to their task, Michael disappeared from their sight. The wood elves only saw a couple of black lightning bolts in the air, which trailed toward the castle. In a blink of an eye, Michael appeared in the throne hall, moving past all the soldiers outside. Lustrous braziers, half enclosing each of the 10 onyx columns, lit up the lower levels of the throne hall and engulfed the throne hall in a brilliant glimmer. The paintings of vast landscapes on the arched ceiling danced in the flickering light while statues looked down upon the porcelain floor of this regal hall. For a castle built in a hurry, they really put some effort into decorating the throne hall. Michael couldn't help wondering who was the ruler of this castle. He walked toward the noble throne of carved rock that sat 20 or 30 steps above the ground. The throne was covered in hallowed carvings and intricate runes, and fixed on each of the broad ears was a sapphire rose. The light pillows were a light teal, and these too had been adorned with burnished sigils. A teal rug ran from the throne down the center and looped back from both left and right while square dag banners with gilded tassels swung gently from the walls. Between each banner hung a lantern. None but a few have been lit, illuminating the portraits of angels in their perfectly forged armor. Sunlight peeked through the extensive tinted glass windows edged by veils colored the same teal as the banners. The curtains had been adorned with impressive needlework and emblazoned edges. Michael walked around the throne hall like he owned the place. He could hear the heavy boots clanking as the Sky Hall soldiers rushed into the throne hall. The soldiers were still contemplating what had just happened. A few minutes ago, several things happened at once. First, they were patrolling the castle grounds as usual. Then they saw the sky darken, followed by a violent lightning storm, something they had never seen before in this world. The lightning storm lasted for a few moments before completely vanishing into thin air. They wanted to check the place, but before they could do it, they saw a strong breeze of wind moving past him. Then, they saw a bolt of lightning heading into the throne hall. To their shock, they saw a human roaming around the throne hall when they entered. They never saw him enter the castle. Still, he was there. The only explanation of how he entered the throne hall was by using a spell that defied the rule of this world. Something was wrong, very wrong. The soldiers could feel it. Since these soldiers were stationed away from the Sky Hall for so long, they didn't recognize Michael as the Dark Lord. The soldiers surrounded Michael with their swords and spears pointed at him. Michael stopped at the bottom of the stairs to the throne and turned back. His eyes searched among the armored soldiers for their leader. He expected someone from a higher rank to appear before him soon. As he expected, a tall man wearing full metal armor walked through the soldiers. He was armed to the teeth. The man slowly removed his helmet, revealing his elven features and striking golden hair. "Who are you?" The elf spoke with a gritty tone that showed no warmth whatsoever. Not that Michael expected the elf to be warm when he was trespassing. If it wasn't for the question of how he entered the castle without their knowledge, Michael was sure the elf would have ordered his men to take him down by now. For a moment, Michael did not give the elf any answer. He kinda kept the elves and the other soldiers in the dark. Then, Michael cracked his neck and knuckles. "You are a human. Aren't you a long way from home?" asked the elf. "So there are humans in this world?" Michael asked the elf slowly. His words confused the elf a bit. What did he mean by "in this world"? The elf questioned himself. As someone who spent more time in Itenes than Michael, the elf knew the humans lived far away in small groups. Unlike the cultivation continents, humans were a minority here. They rarely traveled outside their tribes. Yet the elf noticed a human roaming around the castle as he owned the place. Furthermore, the elf was still struggling to grasp how he entered the castle and whether he used arch-energy or not. "You are trespassing. It's a crime punishable by death," the elf threatened Michael. "I could say the same to you," said Michael as the elf frowned. "You trespassed my world. So can you blame me for thinking about killing you all?" Somehow, the human's words did not feel like an empty threat. "Your world." The elf creased his sword-like brows. Someone hasn't done his research. "Anyhow, tell the ruler of this place to meet me here, and I will make your deaths as painless as possible." Michael shrugged. Pity he wouldn't get any experience points for killing them, but he at least received badass points. At that moment, he had other concerns, like finding the one who rules this castle. The orc tar served someone, and Michael wanted to know who. In the elf's eyes, the human didn't seem like the person who could be reasoned with or the one who would stand down. He knew a battle was inevitable. As he was about to issue an order to take him down, a majestic voice echoed through the hall. "Stand down." Chapter 823. Deal with the Sky Hall. Michael heard the voice from behind. He slowly turned around to see a hunched-back old woman with pure white hair appear near the throne. Her hair was tied into a bun, and she wore pearl robes adorned with intricate symbols that shined in the light. The old woman climbed down the stairs without a concern in the world. When the elf and the others noticed the old woman, they immediately bowed. The old woman didn't make any gesture to acknowledge the soldiers. Instead, her gaze was locked on Michael. The soldiers knelt down as their heavy metal clanked against the marble floor. "Ghost," the old woman addressed Michael by his name. "So you are the ruler of this castle?" Michael asked the old woman. "Everyone leave." The old woman raised her voice. Her voice sounded like a bell in a silent area. As soon as the soldiers heard the old woman's order, they stood up, turned around, and left the throne hall without a word, leaving Michael and the old woman behind. "I am a representative," said the old woman. "Then tell your boss to stay out of this world. It belongs to me." Michael looked down to match the old woman's eyes. Although he could kill the old woman with a single look, he refrained himself from doing so. "You may have power in this world, but we both know you won't stay here forever. You will return to the Dark Ocean and eventually step foot off the southern continent, leaving Mugashuka's protection. It is wise for you not to cross my higher-ups if you want to survive," the old woman said. She was nonchalant despite knowing Ghost could end her life in a heartbeat. Michael was slightly surprised. The old woman seemed to know more about him. Obviously, she was someone with knowledge about him. "Careful with the tone, Grandma. I can still kill you with a snap of my fingers," said Michael. The old woman just let out a gentle smile. You can, but you won't. Unless you want the Sky Hall to be at your doorsteps, you will refrain from harming any more of my soldiers, said the old woman. Typical Sky Hall. Don't think I don't know your little act of harvesting netherils and demon skeletons. Also, if the Sky Hall had really wanted me gone, the war would have started already. But here we are. So what does that tell you? Your boss doesn't want me dead for some reason. Michael was just making a guess here. He didn't know he was spot on. As he said, Andor, the god of time and space and the man who controlled the Sky Hall behind the scene, did not want Michael dead. Instead, he was manipulating the events to put Noah and Michael against each other. For him to escape the immortal realm, he needed a god dead. Since the past Dark Lord beat him to near death, Andor hoped the dead god would be Michael at the end of their battle. If you don't cut off your infected arm, you will die. Just like, you are an infection to all worlds. Some people are the infected arm, the Sky Hall must do what's necessary to keep the body alive. Nice way to justify genocides and to slaughter innocent people. None who helps you is innocent. The old woman saw lightning bolts appear around his wrist. They crackled, hissing like coiling snakes to shoot her down. Only one thing stopped Michael from ending the old woman's life: his instincts and the system's warning in his head. For some reason, the system went crazy when an urge to kill the old woman appeared in his heart. Michael took a deep breath as the crackling lightning bolts disappeared. By the looks of it, we both have to do what we don't like, said the old woman. And what that might be? Coexists in this world. You can kill anyone, but eventually, you will leave this world. Are you willing to gamble on the Wood Elves' lives that we won't bring the wrath of Sky Hall after you're gone? As much as he hated to admit it, the old woman was right. He wouldn't be able to protect the Wood Elves forever by staying with them. Judging by the old woman's look in her eyes, he could tell she had some kind of deal to strike with him. Why do I feel like you're about to propose a deal? Asked Michael as the old woman chuckled. Indeed I am. It is a simple one, actually. There is a land that the locals call the Ash Field, far south of here. You agree to give that land to us, and we will stop our war against the locals. What's important about that place? Asked Michael, only to see the old woman shake her head. You don't have to know. Do not forget we are not allies. On the contrary, we are enemies preparing to face each other in the future. Unlike you, we aren't the gods here. You are. So you have to protect your flock. Michael knew the old woman would have already guessed he would spy on them if he agreed to the deal. But still, the old woman wanted to strike this deal, which made Michael more curious about this ash field. What's about this place that made the Sky Hall negotiate with me, the Dark Lord? Michael questioned himself. Deep down, Michael knew agreeing to this deal was the right thing to do. He could use the time to learn more about this world, especially the ash field, and make the Wood Elves and all who worship him stronger. Once he was done with the Wood Elves, they would chase away any invader who stepped into this magical land without his help. To do that, he needed time. Unfortunately, making this deal was the only way he would get more of it. Do we have a deal? Asked the old woman. As you said, we both have to do things we don't like. But, Michael raised a finger. If any of your soldiers ever stepped a foot outside this ash field, you won't deal with Ghost. You will deal with the Dark Lord. The place darkened as Michael said. For the first time, a sliver of fear emerged in the old woman's eyes. And when I visit this place tomorrow, I don't want to see any more of your soldiers. As he finished his sentence, Michi turned around and walked away from the old woman. There was nothing for him to learn more from the old woman. After Michael left the castle, he noticed the Sky Hall soldiers standing in a line, blocking his path. But soon, the elf captain signaled the soldiers to clear the path for him. When Michael noticed the elf, his eyes burned with rage and killing lust. If Michael was a betting man, he would say the elf had learned what had happened to his precious men. Michael didn't say anything to antagonize the man. He didn't think it was worth it. This isn't over, the elf mumbled, just loud enough for Michael to hear him. You better hope so, said Michael before disappearing from their sight. This time, the soldiers confirmed their suspicions. He is using spells. The elf was speechless, but that didn't reduce his anger toward the human by any means. After leaving the castle, Michael returned to where he had left the Wood Elves behind. By the time Michael arrived, the Wood Elves had gathered around a pile of metal armor and weapons. The Wood Elves immediately dropped to their knees when they saw Michael. Even Tazkin, who had previously lost his faith in his god, seemed completely turned to his old ways. They will leave this place tomorrow. This battle with them is over, but we have yet to win the war, said Michael. Vidora and the villages were waiting for Michael's return. Meanwhile, the wood elves bathed Vidora with everything Iag asked for. The Hydra sat on Michael's throne and asked for every fruit the wood elves had for themselves. The wood elven ladies particularly fell in love with the cute yet terrifying creature that accompanies their god. They spared no expense in showering the Hydra with love and reverence, especially after Iag gave her word that Michael would heal the wounded. The sun slowly descended on the horizon, painting the blue sky with its golden rays. Every tree and plant life in the forest radiated dazzling lights. Darkness brought the real beauty of Itenes. Vidora saw the forest light up as the entire forest seemed magical. Even Cain was in awe of the beauty. With the trees and plants being a natural light source, the wood elves did not need any torches to brighten their village. What's taking him so long? Sarba asked his siblings. He was worried. If you ask me, I'd say he's exploring this world and collecting herbs and stuff. I saw how his eyes lit up when we first arrived in this world, said Iag. She was indeed right. Michael was collecting herbs and exploring the magical forest as they spoke. That's the reason for his lateness. Look! A child's shout broke Sarba's focus on Iag. Kirat limped toward the wood platform's edge and saw Michael and Taskin's men. They are back! Thilv's mother bounced up and down in joy like a child. Eventually, Vidora saw Michael land on the platform as the wood elves knelt down to show him their respect. He just casually waved at them, wordlessly ordering them to rise. Then, he came to the throne and sat beside them. Something's wrong, Iag said, looking at the dark lines on his forehead. What is it? Asked Saba. I made a deal with Skyhall, said Michael. Chapter 824. A cool god. Michael took Vidora and flew away from the village built on the trees. He came to a mountain cliff where he first appeared in this world. The forest glistened like a neon city with flocks of magical flying beasts decorating the sky in the distance under the starry sky. Looking at the mother tree in the distance, Michael told Vidora everything that had transpired in the castle. After listening to Michael's story, all three heads agreed that making a deal with the old woman was the right thing to do. Otherwise, Michael would be in a constant war in this world too. For a change, Michael wanted some peaceful time here. But he couldn't have peace with the Skyhall soldiers running around. Good thing we have drones and spiders to spy on them when they are in the ash field, said Sarba. But we have to be careful. They know we will do that. Still, they are going for it. It could only mean one thing: they can hide whatever is there from our eyes, said Cain. Time flew past as Michael discussed every aspect of their plan with Vidora. He had to say that it was a wonderful conversation. A while later, Michael tried to contact Gaia, but he couldn't connect to her. The system asked way too many badass points, which Michael outright rejected. Wherever Gaia was, he trusted her to handle herself well. Gradually, Michael felt the exhaustion getting to him as he fell down to take a long nap. He only remembered closing his eyes. By the time he opened them, he saw the sun rising on the horizon. This morning he woke up the same as every day, stretching his muscles. Despite being in a different world, he got up, freshened up, and waltzed into the forest to take a calm morning walk. There was a gentle breeze, creating the single sound of rustling leaves. The leaves appeared as though they were dying to fall out of the tree and join their companions on the forest floor. Together with pine needles and other colorful flora, the leaves formed a thick, springy carpet for him to walk upon. A lazy mist hazed his vision, making the forest and the horizon seem like one from a storybook. The forest around him was imperturbable, as if it was keeping a secret hidden deep within itself. Walking underneath the shade of the trees, he found himself appreciating the scent of these new alien trees. Encompassed by the thick heavy air, he watched as a single bird that looked like a sparrow fluttered high above the cyan forest. A few feet next to him was an eager red-furred monkey hastily scampered from tree to tree, awaiting the chill of winter. The forest, he realized, was home to many magical creatures he had never seen in his life before. In giving protection and food, the forest was gladly rewarded with the company of these animals. The forest was pure and clean, as though it had never been disturbed by man and his vicious life-killing machines. Luckily, the alchemy book he bought from the system included the wildlife in this world. Otherwise, Michael would have failed to tell the difference between a poisonous plant to a medicinal herb. Some of the glowing mushrooms seemed toxic as hell. Michael collected all of them one by one for future experiments. After mastering all the formulas that exist in the world, he was researching new potions and pills. He had collected hundreds of herbs on his way to the village. When he arrived at the outskirts, Michael simply leaped into the air and landed right beside his throne. The villagers knelt down when they saw him. "You do not have to kneel down every time you see me," said Michael. Their kneeling became quite tiring so quickly. "Isn't this our duty, Dark Lord?" Kirat asked Michael as he shook his head. "There is nothing more dangerous than having blind faith in someone, Kirat. You are not mindless creatures. Keep your faith and loyalty toward me in your heart. That's enough for me. I do not expect you all to kneel down every time you see me," said Michael. One of the many reasons Qin Jiu and the Sky Hall were so hell-bent on killing him was how Qin Jiu witnessed a future where people had no free will. Contrary to what she saw, Michael wanted everyone in the world to be free. If the Sky Hall and the Guardian Guild hadn't tried to kill him and imprison him, Michael's aim would have been just getting stronger and living his life to the fullest. In a way, they pushed him to be the Dark Lord. So every step of the way, Michael had been cautioned that he wouldn't turn into something Qin Jiu said he would. Besides, if he had accepted the Wood Elves behaving like robots, their individual traits and talents might not come to light. Exploring their talents was just as important as exploring this world to Michael. The Wood Elves reluctantly nodded and raised to their feet. Then, Michael lazily sat on his throne with his gaze fixed on Kirat. "How's the wounded doing?" Michael asked the Elder Elf. "They are alive thanks to you, Dark Lord," said Kirat. "So, what's your day-to-day life like? What did you people do all day before they invaded your land?" Michael was curious to learn about their day-to-day life. They had no fancy cities, arch-energy, and evil cultivators to disturb their daily life. So Michael wondered how they passed their time. "Oh," the old elf's eyes lit up. "We wake up, tend to the forest, teach the children our ways, collect fruits and vegetables from the forest, and send gifts to the nearby tribes. But most of our time is spent before your statue, praying and talking to you about our lives. You can talk to me now." "Taskin." Michael turned his gaze toward Taskin. He had a feeling this particular wood elf has something in his mind. Although Michael had a pretty good idea about it, he wanted to hear from Taskin himself. The moment Michael gestured at Taskin to step forward, Kirat's heart started to pound against his chest. Taskin was one of the few elves who lost their faith in the Dark Lord after the demons invaded their world. "Speak your mind, Taskin. I am a cooler god than you think," Michael reassured the wood elf with a gentle smile. Taskin looked a bit reluctant at first, but seeing everyone's gazes were fixed on him, he sighed and decided to ask the one question that kept him awake many nights. "When the demons invaded us and slaughtered thousands of our people, we prayed to you non-stop. But what did we do not to deserve your kindness and mercy then, Dark Lord? Are you questioning our god, Taskin?" Kirat's face twitched when he saw Taskin question Michael. But Michael shut him up with a wave of his hand. The wood elves who heard Taskin felt chill running down their spine. The Dark Lord, they learned from the notes, was not a cooler god, as he said. In stark contrast, he was a vengeful one. Thilv trembled, but Michael calmed their nerves with a smile. "Do you see these scars, Taskin?" Michael asked Taskin, pointing at countless scars riddling his body. Taskin nodded. "I wasn't born with these scars, Taskin. Each of them has a story to it. You are very wrong if you think gods have no enemies." Kirat's jaw dropped a bit when he heard the Dark Lord. "There are many worlds out there, each more powerful and dangerous than yours. I am at war with the demons you fought here, but what you've seen is not even a fraction of their power or what they could do," the wood elves behind Taskin gasped. "Let me simplify this. Out there, each of them could use what you call magic. Some of them are as powerful as I am at this point. When you were fighting your war, I was fighting my own. But if I have to fight 2 wars at the same time for my people, I will gladly do it." Michael's words brought tears to many eyes. The wood elves sobbed, feeling the radiance from his words. "First, I have to prepare you for the future before us. Like it or not, this is just a temporary peace, and we will fight them in the future. And we will fight for you, Dark Lord." Thilv stepped forward and gave Michael her word. "You have to. Not because I ask you to, but because if they win, the world we know will disappear forever," Michael warned them. The world he saw a glimpse of was still haunting his dreams. There was no doubt in Michael's mind higher powers were working against him. For instance, the one the past Dark Lord warned him about, the one who would get stronger if he slaughtered the beasts in the demon's grave. Another example would be Mugashuko and the one dark queen he serves. She was not only a threat to his universe but to multiple universes. Any one of them could be the reason for the future Chinjo witness. One thing was certain in Michael's mind. He was not responsible for that world she saw. Everything Taskin and the Wood Elves thought about the Dark Lord changed in a blink of an eye. They never expected the almighty Dark Lord to have enemies who could challenge him. Nonetheless, their faith in the Dark Lord only increased after he explained why he hadn't answered their prayers, not the other way around. Now that I am here, I will give you something that will let you directly talk to me. You will be able to contact me whenever you want. This way, what happened wouldn't happen again, said Michael as the Wood Elves gasped in surprise. Did my words satisfy you, Taskin? Michael asked the Wood Elf. To be honest, Michael saw great potential in Taskin and Thilv. They could be his first subordinates in this magical world. But first, he needed to know their resolve and will to serve him. Please forgive me if I said anything wrong, Dark Lord. Taskin lowered his head. Not at all. I like when my people speak their minds. In the future, if you want to ask or say anything, do not hold back. Even a god can learn much from mortals, said Michael. Taskin and Thilv's eyes watered, seeing how down-to-earth their god was despite how powerful he was. As Thilv was standing with her watery eyes, Michael turned his gaze toward her. Thilv, I heard you have a map of this forest. Can I see it? Yes, of course, Dark Lord. Thilv bobbed her head up and down frantically before running into one of the wooden huts. A few seconds later, she came back with a big round white leaf. On its surface, Michael saw a roughly drawn map of this forest. System, locate what we need in this map, Michael asked the system. Soon, Michael saw a glow in the map far north from their tribe. It's time to make gold coins rain, Michael chuckled inside. Chapter 825 Hontorum and the God of Light Eye. A few days ago, back on the Aur continent, Gaia was preparing to attend the auction organized by the Hontorum. This auction was not like a typical aqua auction. Instead, the Hontorum auction had only one weapon to sell. Only those who had the invitation could enter the premises. At that moment, Gaia was not in her usual black robes or armor. On the contrary, she chose fancy clothes fit for a princess and a queen. If the dwarves suspected something amiss, they would call off the auction, and she must not let that happen. She needed to play the role of a wealthy heir until she learned more about the devastating weapons the dwarves had recently built. He should have a good reason for not talking to me. Gaia laid flat on the queen-sized bed and looked at the empty space beside her. She had been staying in Delgarum, the dwarven kingdom, in a high-end inn. The room had everything a rich noble could ask for, but Gaia felt lonely without Michael. She preferred a cabin with him over a castle without him. Her loneliness grew every day that went without his voice. Rolling on the bed, she kept looking at the engagement ring on her finger. The curtains covering the windows added an orange glow to the morning light. It reminded Gaia of the time she slept in a beach hut, cuddling Michael and watching the ocean emerge under the golden shimmer. For a moment, her mind conjured the rhythmic waves, soft on the sandy shore, and felt her heartbeat to the same slow pace. She breathed in deeply. A new day had begun. My lady, it's time for you to leave the bed and get ready for the auction. Gaia heard Azazel's voice in her head like an annoying alarm. All right. Gaia exhaled heavily. She reached her hand out to the fabric, noticing how up close the light poured through every open space between fibers, no different from how it once came through the beach hut walls, illuminating like brilliant fireflies each dawn. The blanket was warm beneath her fingers, and when the sun flooded the room, repainting the colors, she felt a little of those golden rays soak into her skin. Finally, Gaia left the bed to take a bath in the bathroom attached to the room. Almost after 30 minutes, Gaia exited the room, wearing the silky smooth bath towel Michael gave her. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she adorned the elegant noble dress Michael brought her from the system for occasions such as this one. The mirror before her reflected the dress, covering only a small portion of her shoulders and flowing down into a fancy queen and neckline. It was a tight fit that put the focus on her breasts but in a graceful manner. Her arms were only covered at her shoulders, a choice that added to the elegance and grace of the dress. The elegant black dress waist was thin, but it was a loose fit. A bow had been wrapped around her, resting gently on her lower back. Below the waist, the dress fitted snugly around her and had an accordion style. The dress reached just below her knees and was longer at the sides and back of the dress. She was wearing open toes, which added simplicity and elegance. To top it all off, she wore a subtle necklace and several elegant bracelets. Before leaving the room, Gaia double-checked the teleportation scrolls and the APD around her wrist. After making sure everything was in place, Gaia left the cozy room. By the time she reached the bustling street of Delgarum, a carriage was waiting for her. The carriage was owned and manned by someone from the Dark Lord's army. "Shall we go, my lady?" asked the middle-aged man in the driver's seat. Gaia nodded as the horses galloped toward her destination. Apparently, Han Torum dwarves chose a drama theater in the entertainment district. Because most of the dwarves couldn't fly without a flying sword, they banned flying inside the city. Thus, Gaia and all others had to use other means of transportation, such as carriages. While the carriage was on its way to the entertainment district, Gaia took out a tablet-size mirror from her space ring. "Azazel, get me Sadie and Arya," Gaia said before casting a soundproof barrier around her. Soon, the dark mirror flickered as the faces of Arya and Sadie appeared in the mirror side by side. "My lady, Dark Queen," Sadie and Arya lowered their heads, bowing toward Gaia. "Arya, how was the recon?" asked Gaia. As we expected, the place was crawling with Han Torum dwarves. You can recognize them with the big ruby rings on their fingers. I suspect the auction will happen under the theater. When I was there, I saw 2 dwarves guarding the stairs. They had some kind of contraption near them, like a lever, Arya reported to Gaia. "Did they suspect you?" Arya shook her head. "No. I had the advantage of blending with the crowd." "What about humans?" "Normally I'd assume a tall human like you would stand out in a crowd full of dwarves. The entertainment district is surprisingly diverse, my lady. Except for the elves, you can see almost every race there. Of course, the majority of them were dwarves, but I had enough orcs and humans to blend with," said Arya. "That's because Delgarum is holding an annual think tank," Sadie interjected as Gaia turned her focus to the Silver Moon Girl. "You mean a gathering where all the races come to Delgarum to show their inventions?" Gaia asked as Sadie nodded. Gaia had heard about the think tank and even knew some of the Naga ministers who wanted to participate in this think tank. While she was in Nagaland, Gaia always advocated against participating in it because she didn't like the idea of their innovations going public. Therefore, Gaia chose not to participate, just like the elves. But now that Zanali and her mother were in charge, that would soon change. "Rumor has it that the dwarves received some interesting blueprints this year," said Sadie. "Did you hear anything about the man who invented the Death Kiss crossbows? Whoever it is, they are extremely good at hiding their steps. My girls are working day and night on this, and they came up with nothing. But my lady, I suspect there is more about this than it meets the eye." "What do you mean?" "The same time you met the orcs and came across those crossbows, a guardian carriage had entered and left the kingdom in a hurry." A light bulb lit in Gaia's head. She had indeed seen a carriage with the Guardian Guild symbol painted on it when she was trailing Valmos. Initially, she suspected Noah to be in the kingdom. But Sadie's little birdies came up with nothing. Moreover, Sadie's spies in Penn Town informed her that Noah was with his family at that time. So Gaia didn't pay much mind to the carriage. She had too many things on her plate to trail the carriages as according to Sadie, there was more than one carriage. "You think one of those carriages might have transported the inventor?" "We can't deny it, my lady. I am working on turning a guardian to the dark side. Once I am done we might know more about him." Gaia noticed a strange glow in Sadie's eyes. It was like a tigress on her way to a hunt. Obviously, turning people to the dark side thrilled Sadie, and if she managed to turn a guardian to their side, it would be a huge help in the future. Buying guardians with gold coins used to be so easy when Noah was not the supreme guardian. After he took the helm, he launched an extensive investigation and fired all the corrupted guardians. Now finding a corrupt guardian was as rare as finding a gold coin on the street. "Be careful. Don't fly too close to the sun. If you feel something is wrong, back off. Noah tends to give us surprises." "I will, my lady. Also, keep an eye on the Winston Manor." "I have a strange feeling about that." "As you wish, my lady," Sadie agreed with a nod as Gaia turned her gaze back to Arya. "Arya, I want you to cover all the exits from the theater. I don't think we have enough coins to win the auction. So we have to trail whoever wins the auction and get our hands on the weapon. My people are already covering the exits as we speak, my lady. Unless they use teleportation scrolls, we can trail them the moment they step outside the theater," said Arya. "Don't worry about teleportation. Eladir will take care of that." Eladir had already reached the theater, and engravings runes around the theater to prevent anyone from using teleportation scrolls. The runes would stay inactive until someone tries to use a scroll. Stopping someone from using a teleportation scroll was much easier than tracking them down after they had used one. Gaia left no stone unturned in this plan, because failure was not an option. If those weapons had the capability to turn the tide of war, the Dark Army needed to have them on their side. After dismissing Arya and Sadie, Gaia contacted Azazel as he appeared in the mirror. "My lady," Azazel bowed. "Tell Saber to send one of his people to shadow Sadie. If the Guardians are digging a hole to trap her, I want her safe." Sadie was too valuable to lose. So Gaia wanted to keep her hidden and safe from the Guardians. If the Guardians found out she is working for the Dark Lord, their dreams of controlling the Silver Moon and building a web of spies would crumble to dust. Following Sadie's matter, Gaia had one more thing to deal with before turning her full focus on the Han Torum dwarves. "Have you heard from Mother Yer?" asked Gaia. While Saber was in the Nether Realm, collecting rare herbs for Michael, Adelia was tasked to shadow the elves who cursed Christopher and imprisoned Claire's mother. She was ordered to rescue Claire's mother by any means necessary by the Dark Lord himself. She has reached Nelnather and is getting close to the Mortero family. "She also asked me to keep an eye on you, my lady," Gaia smiled. "And I would ask you the same. Keep an eye on her. I want and can't lose her again. I will talk to her after this auction." At that point in time, Gaia had no idea the surprise Noah had for all of them. Chapter 826 Han Torum and the God of Light 2. The entertainment district of Embercrest was filled with all sorts of people except the rich. Once again, the dwarves tend to care little about status among their own race. One could see a millionaire dwarf drink and sing in a pub with his buddies, who might very well be minors. It was very difficult for people to tell the difference between a rich dwarf and a poor dwarf. After a long smooth ride, Gaia's carriage reached the theater. From the outside, it looked rustic, beautiful, and cheerful. Clay bricks and carved pillars made up most of the building's outer structure. It was difficult to see through the curtained windows, but the liveliness from within could be felt outside. "Park the carriage nearby and wait for my word," Gaia said to the driver and stepped out of the carriage. A wide straight avenue littered with dwarves welcomed Gaia. As Arya said, Gaia noticed many orcs, humans, and beast men on the street. Thanks to those, she didn't stand out among the dwarves, and the short bushy beard species didn't raise an eyebrow as they would if she had visited the place later this year. 20 or so marble stairs led to the theater door flanked by 2 dwarves in silver armor and warhammers with intricate engravings. "Hrm," the dwarves growled under their breath when they saw Gaia's long legs. Hate toward the taller species was evident in their eyes as the dwarves opened the door for Gaia. As she entered the theater through the decorated metal door, she was welcomed by dancing thespians and excitement. It was as charming inside as it was on the outside. Rounded stone beams supported the upper floor and the huge lamps attached to them. The walls were decorated with mounted animal heads, shields, and portraits of various dwarves. The theater itself was packed. As one would expect, dwarves were the primary clientele here, which often meant great company and chaos. Several long tables were occupied by beast men. Humans and a few orcs occupied the other, smaller tables who seemed to be enjoying themselves a lot, especially the dancers. The center stage was built several meters higher than the ground but not too high to ache one's neck. Several female dancers, including beast men, women and human women, danced gracefully, wearing revealing clothes. The air reeked of freshly brewed ale. It was almost overwhelming. Everywhere Gaia turned, she saw the dwarves drinking, laughing, and fighting like it was no one's business. This behavior didn't surprise Gaia much, as the dwarves were unruly creatures with unpredictable behavior. Gaia's gaze swept across the theater and noticed a few humans walking toward the 2 dwarves guarding the stairs. "That must be the entrance," Gaia said to herself before squeezing through the crowd toward the dwarves. She had to be careful not to step on any dwarves on her way because there were several of them rolling on the ground. For a Great 8 clan, Han Torum picked an unusual spot for the auction. Gaia took out the invitation with a flick of her wrist and held it in her hand. The dwarves noticed the approaching human and the golden invitation in her hand. "Here you go." Gaia extended the invitation for the dwarves to see the embossed letters on the invitation. The 2 dwarves gawked at the invitation from top to bottom. Then, they removed the red rope blocking the stairs leading downstairs. Golden lamps brightly lit the steps and led Gaia to a spacious hall under the theater. Only a few people remained in the hall. The marble floor shimmed under the bright chandelier light. Crimson-red curtains woven with elegant designs covered the windows and the walls. When she entered the hall, a human girl wearing an alluring red dress that hugged her perfect hourglass structure came to greet Gaia. She was one of the thespians and was assigned to be the auctioneer. "My lady," the red-haired beauty bowed toward Gaia. "Please enjoy the beverages and make yourself at home. The auction will begin shortly," said the beauty. She tried to avoid gazing at Gaia's dress but failed miserably. Her eyes sparkled. But Gaia was more focused on the others in the room. To her surprise, she noticed a few orcs along with a beast men. As for humans, there were 4 in the room. Among the 4, 2 of them wore white robes with the iconic Guardian Guild symbol engraved on their chests. Avoiding their gazes, Gaia made her way to the long oak table with silver plates filled with snacks, fruits, and beverages such as ale, wine, and beer. "How are you doing?" When Gaia came to the table, a woman with fluffy fox ears greeted her. The woman's tail slowly swayed left and right as she sipped the wine from the golden chalice. "Good. What about you?" Gaia greeted the golden-haired woman with a gentle smile. To avoid looking out of the place, Gaia took an empty glass, poured red wine, and pretended to drink it. "I couldn't help but adore your dress," the woman complimented Gaia's dress. Gaia was no stranger to fake compliments, but the woman's words were genuine. Any woman with a tad bit of taste in clothes would kill to get a dress like the one Gaia was wearing. It was a pity that Gaia didn't know why people had been glaring at her dress the moment she stepped out of the carriage. If anything, this dress was drawing too much attention toward her. "My fiancé gave this to me," said Gaia. "He must have good taste in clothing." "Oh, pardon my manners. I am Kalubra," the beast woman introduced herself, reaching out to shake Gaia's hand. For a moment, Gaia stared at her in surprise. "Aren't you a bit too friendly when we are all here to bid for weapons?" asked Gaia, but she shook her hand anyways. She followed Michael's words of making allies anywhere you can instead of enemies. "We ladies have to stick together. What's the worst that could happen by making some friends?" Kalubra shrugged. Kalubra's cute and cuddly look may fool the others but not Gaia. She could identify a killer when she saw one, and Kalubra was a predator despite her foxy ears. Gaia had a feeling that Kalubra may have sensed the same. No one would send an innocent to a black auction that deals in destructive weapons, especially not the Beast King Zelik. "Look at them going," Kalubra's gaze fell on the Guardians. "Why do they want to participate in this auction when their new Supreme Guardian brags about stopping wars?" Judging by Kalubra's tone, it was apparent the fox hates the Guardian Guild. Although they seemed to share the same hatred toward the Guardian Guild, Gaia remained silent. She was here to track down the buyer and the weapon, not to bitch about the guild and Noah with this total stranger. While Gaia was waiting for the auction to begin, she received another shock. The orcs who bought the Deathkiss crossbows entered the hall with their red-skinned leader leading them. Once the orcs entered the hall, an uneasy atmosphere surrounded them. Everyone, including the green orcs, tried not to make any direct eye contact with them. Luckily for Gaia, she changed her face using the mask. Otherwise, they might have recognized her and suspected something was amiss. None seemed to have any idea about these orcs. But whoever they were, they had deep pockets and connections to bid for the weapon and receive an extra invitation from Han Torum. "Excuse me for a moment, Miss Kalubra." Gaia excused herself away from Kalubra and went to the corner. "Azazel, are you getting this?" The spider hidden in her hair crawled onto her shoulder and sent the feedback to Azazel, where he recorded everything. "The same ones who bought the crossbows. It seems like we have new players, my lady," Azazel amused. "The question is, where do they stand when it comes to the Dark Lord? Put their faces in a recording crystal and send them to the elf. He might have some idea," Gaia said to Azazel in a husky voice. Even after Michael had revealed himself as the Dark Lord, the business relationship between him and Lord Information remained untethered. The elf preferred gold coins and favors more than anything. As long as he got paid, Lord Information gave no shit about where the coins came from. The only problem, however, was accessing the elf. After Noah took the mantle, he put surveillance on almost every information broker in the world, and Lord Information was on top of that list. Luckily, Michael had built drones and spiders that could connect Lord Information to Azazel. "We will find out soon enough. Ladies and gentlemen," Gaia heard the hostess' voice after a few clinking sounds. The hostess stood in the center with a wine glass raised above her eye line. Everyone turned their focus on the hostess as red sofas materialized around her one by one. The door Gaia came through closed from the outside, trapping them inside. Please take your seats. The auction will begin now. The hostess gestured at the sofas as everyone plunged into the comfy cushion. Kalubra and Gaia went to the center and sat beside each other, facing the red orcs. After everyone comfortably took their seats, the chandelier above them brightened. Gaia recorded everything around her with the spider while waiting for the Hontorum dwarves to appear. At the moment, there were no dwarves in the room. That soon changed when the hall they were in split open, revealing an underground passage. The cushions trembled as a platform moved upwards, carrying the dwarves and their new contraption, a cow-sized weapon with a conical body. Its metal body was painted with gold and engraved with intricate designs. At first sight, it did not look like a weapon to anyone but a saxophone. Of course, the natives of this world didn't know what a saxophone looked like. Is that the weapon? Gaia asked herself. Unlike Kalubra, Gaia didn't seem disappointed. She knew better than to judge a weapon by its look. The Guardians and the Red Orcs wouldn't be here if the weapon was not powerful enough to cause mass destruction. Chapter 827 Hontorum and the God of Light 3. The two dwarves stood beside the unusual weapon and glanced at their audience briefly. They were like any other typical dwarves. Bushy beards, bulky bodies, and smelled like ale. One had a receding forehead, while the other looked young with black curly hair. Everyone in the hall was able to see the weapon clearly. Now they all wanted to see what it could do before they started bidding. As though the dwarves had sensed their curiosity, they introduced themselves without taking any more of their time. I am Bufug, and my partner is called God Dun. The young dwarf introduced himself and his partner. I know no one gives a shit about our names. So let's go straight to the demonstration. Shall we? Bufug's gaze swept across the hall. Their names seemed fake to Gaia. No one in their right mind would give their real names when they were supposedly auctioning a mass destruction weapon. However, the dwarves were right. She didn't give two shits about their names. All she needed was to see what this weapon before her was capable of. Before we do that, we should tell them that this is only the prototype of the real beast, said God Dun, the old dwarf. What do you mean a prototype? The red orc growled. Means we don't want any of you to pull a damn surprise on us. Make no mistake. The real beast is 100 times more powerful than this one. So wait till after the demonstration, said God Dun. He wasn't afraid of the big brute orc despite the fact the orc could kill him with a single punch. The cultivation power between them was huge. God Dun, the dwarf, was at the core formation level, while the orc was at the fusion stage. Nonetheless, the orc remained seated without resorting to violence. Just like everyone else, they wanted to see what the prototype was capable of. Once you see the demonstration and finish bidding, we will take you to the real thing in a more secured area. Gaia's plan slightly changed after hearing about the dwarves. Initially, she thought the dwarves would bring the weapon to the auction. Now, the dwarves took a turn and only brought the prototype. Because of this change, she had to follow the dwarves and the one who won the auction to the real weapon and steal it from the dwarves. She hoped either the human couple or Kalubra would win against the Guardians and the orcs. Among all of them, they looked least threatening with their core-strengthening cultivation level. To start the demonstration, we need a volunteer, said God Dun. Luckily, we do have not one, Bufug raised a finger. Not two, he raised another finger. One by one, he raised all of his fingers. But 5 lucky volunteers. God Dun clapped his hands as the door on the other side of the hall slowly creaked open, revealing a group of people bound by their legs with iron chains. The group was surprisingly diverse. They had 1 orc, 3 humans, and a beast man who had the body of a bear and the face of a man. Move your asses. The 2 dwarves behind them poked the human with his battle axe, pushing into the hall. Kalubra raised her brows in shock. Not because she saw one of her kind but because everyone in the group was at the core strengthening stage. The iron chains tied around their legs and arms didn't seem magically enhanced with runes. Rather, they looked ordinary. Which led them to question why they were not trying to get out of their chains. The 2 dwarves led them into the hall, and made them stand facing the wide end of the conical weapon. There was at least 7 meters distance between the group and the weapon. Whatever they did, they sure didn't earn the dwarves' empathy. The human tried to tell the other something but couldn't speak through the cloth tied around his mouth. Everyone in the group had their mouths shut by a piece of cloth. Now pieces of shits, listen to me and do exactly what I tell you to do. Try something funny, and you know what will happen to your precious loved ones. Bufug threatened the group in his gruff dwarven voice. The hatred in Bufug's eyes burned brightly like a campfire in pitch-black night. It made Gaia wonder what the group really did to piss the dwarves this much. But whatever they did, it was not her job to find out and rescue them. The Guardians were literally sitting there and watching this happen. Even if Michael was there instead of Gaia, he wouldn't have raised a finger when the Guardian who was supposed to do something was standing there doing nothing. Meanwhile, God Dun walked back to the weapon and fiddled with the knob attached to the side of the weapon. Everyone was so focused on what the weapon could do that they barely gave a shit about the group facing the weapon head-on. Cast your most powerful defense spells when we take away the piece of cloth. Do you understand? Bufug asked as the two dwarves standing behind the group gave everyone a stern kick to their knees to bring them down to match their height. Even after they brought everyone down, the orc was still taller than the dwarves, which garnered some laughter among the participants. Gaia glanced at the red orc and his group to see if they would react to dwarves beating one of their own. But no, the orcs didn't even flinch an eye. It didn't surprise Gaia after she noticed the expressionless faces of the Guardians. Eventually, the dwarves removed the clothes and let them get back to their feet. The dwarves waited with their battle hammers clenched tight just in case. Then, Bufug threatened them once again. Remember the faces of your loved ones and cast the strongest defense spell on your arsenal, said Bufug. Everyone in the group felt reluctant and afraid to cast the spell, but eventually, they broke under the dwarf's murderous gaze. Then, they all cast their defense spell one by one. Starfire Rain. One of the humans cast the spell as countless glistening stars appeared around him, forming a bright barrier. Static Flare. Suddenly, a crimson-red light flashed across the hall when the beast men cast the spell. The temperature in the room rose by a couple of degrees. As the spell's name suggested, a barrier made of red rays appeared around the beastman. Deflection Flash, Repose Barrier. A few moments later, everyone had a shield around them. The others, including Gaia, couldn't help looking at the scene curiously. The two dwarves who stood behind the group quickly ran toward Bufug and joined their fellow dwarves. In Gaia's eyes, the two dwarves seemed terrified. She could see the fear creeping down their spines through their eyes. The dwarves had witnessed the weapon's power before. She was certain of it. Get ready to be surprised, God Dun. The old dwarf snickered as he brushed the weapon like he was caring for his own horse. Then he pushed the knob inwards as the weapon purred. Gaia expected a fiery steel ball to shoot out of the weapon as it happened with the Death Kiss crossbows. On the contrary, nothing happened. The orcs growled, thinking the dwarves had fooled them. But suddenly, the orc behind the glistening shield roared in utter pain. Gaia was taken aback by the sheer volume of his cry. The big orc screamed like he was going through. Soon, all the others joined the orc in his cry. Blood seeped through their eyes, ears, and nostrils as they collapsed down. Gaia noticed the sound of their cries getting louder as God Dun turned the knob. What is happening? Kalubra whispered to Gaia. No idea, Gaia shrugged. Their cries of agony lasted an entire minute until the orc gasped for air. Then, his big body hit the ground with a heavy thud. One by one, the entire group lost their breath and hit the ground with a sickening thud. Eerie silence swept across the hall. Even after they died, blood slowly drizzled out of every pore in their body. To this moment, Gaia had no idea how they died. This is unacceptable. How do we know they were not poisoned? The two other humans besides the Guardians rose from his chair as though it was on fire and questioned the dwarves. Everyone had the same question in their minds. Why don't you stand there and get your answer? God Dun chuckled as though the human's question amused him. The golden-haired man's face turned red. He expected an answer with a more respectful tone, except he expected that from the wrong person. Dwarves were known for many things, but respectful was not one of them. Although Gaia didn't think the dwarves used some kind of underhanded tactics to kill them, she did want to see more. By more, she wanted someone else to get killed by the weapon. I will settle this. Surprisingly, the red orc stood up. As soon as the human saw the big bad and brute orc stand up, his mouth shut down instantly. The orc was big enough to cast a large shadow on the hall. Then, he turned his gaze toward one of his men. Go stand there and cast yourself a defense spell, said the orc. Hearing the orc, the others were stunned. No one in their right mind would agree to that, especially after witnessing how they suffered and cried. But the orc behind the red orc surprised Gaia by nodding his head. He strolled toward the bodies and waved his hand. Earth Barrier. The orc cast the spell as a golem made out of stone appeared in a blink of an eye. The golem was at least 10 feet tall. It placed its hands before the orc to shield him from harm. "Show us what you can do now," the red orc growled at the dwarves, who weirdly seemed excited rather than worried. Just like before, Goddon fiddled with the knob as the weapon purred like a cat. This time, the weapon vibrated for a few moments. Everyone's gazes were fixed on the golem and the orc. To their shock, the stone golem cracked. Before they could realize what had just happened, the stone golem shattered into pieces as the orc started to roar in pain. Unlike the core-strengthening stage people that died a few seconds ago, the orc was a soul refiner. Yet the result was the same. The orc cried, collapsed to the ground, squirmed like a fish out of water, and suddenly, his cries stopped. However, the time it took the weapon to kill the orc was longer than before. "We are satisfied with the weapon." The red orc didn't even flinch at his comrade's death. He acted as nothing had happened. Gaia was speechless. She realized the Empress wasn't kidding when she said this latest contraption could turn the tide of any war. Imagine what hundreds of these weapons could do. Furthermore, this was just a prototype. So only God knew how powerful the real weapon would be. Chapter 828. Noah is here. After witnessing the strange yet mind-blowing power of the weapon, the dwarves began the auction. The dwarves started the auction with the insane price of 20 billion gold coins. But none bat an eye at the price. Instead, the orcs raised the bid by 5 billion. Gaia was mind-blown to see how rich these orcs were. She was more curious about the orcs than before. But when she thought about what the weapon could do in a real battlefield, the price seemed fair or if not cheap. Even though Gaia had not more than 100,000 gold coins in her space ring, she raised the bid by another 5 billion just to participate in the auction. She knew the final bid would easily go to 100 billion gold coins. That kind of coin was not easy to get. Somehow, Gaia doubted a single individual could have such wealth. Even the Dark Lord Michael himself struggled to reach 1 billion gold coins in wealth. Of course, he would have easily reached that point if Noah hadn't banned the majestic alchemy chains and Hades. 30 billion, Kalubra raised her hand and raised the bid casually. 50 billion, the red orc almost immediately raised the bid after Kalubra. The guardians remained silent, surprisingly. To this moment, they didn't open their mouths once. As seconds turned minutes, the blood around the dead bodies slowly evaporated into the air and nauseated the others. "Clean that up," Goddun ordered the two dwarves behind him. The two short dwarves nodded as they ran toward the bodies while Bufug and Goddun continued the auction. With each bid, the dwarves smiled brighter. The auction was making them very rich. Gaia doubted the Empress didn't send anyone to buy the weapon for herself. It seemed to be the easiest way unless the dwarves had more than one weapon built, and they planned to sell each one separately. Gaia didn't even think about it. 65 billion, the golden-haired man who snapped at the dwarf earlier raised the bid. 70 billion. Finally, the guardian opened his mouth. Gaia was tempted to rob each and everyone in the room. They all could solve their financial problem in one go. Fortunately, Michael promised they wouldn't have to worry about gold coins after he returned from the demon's grave. But even if Gaia had billions of gold coins, she didn't think she would have bid for the weapon when she had the option to steal it. "Enough of this," the red orc growled. 100 billion, Gaia Browns arched up when the orc raised the bid by freaking 30 billion. "Child's play," Kalubra snickered. 150 billion, the orcs growled but restrained themselves from doing anything rash. Everyone in the room raised Gaia's suspicions. Among them, Gaia was almost certain that Kalubra attended the auction on behalf of King Zelik, the Beast King. If that were the case, the orcs would have a difficult time outbidding the foxy woman because she had an entire nation behind her. For an orc who was heartless, the red orc was patient enough to keep himself calm. Although the dwarves were not terribly strong and lacked bodyguards, none of them dared to mess with the auction. They were all well-mannered. Kalubra didn't seem like she would back down anytime soon. 180 billion, the red orc raised the bid. 200 billion, the guardians raised the bid to 200 billion. Their bidding war continued for some time, with even Gaia occasionally raising the bid by 10 or 20 billion. Eventually, the guardians and everyone backed off from the auction except Kalubra and the red orc. The beast woman raised the price to 300 billion, and when the red orc was about to outbid her, the entire hall trembled slightly. For a moment, Gaia thought the dwarves had accidentally turned on the weapon. But no, the place trembled because of the guardian airship. Gaia heard the sudden commotion outside as well as the strange whirring sound coming from above her. Her brain immediately recognized the sound. Guardians. Gaia's heart skipped a beat. My lady, the Guardians dash. Gaia heard the panicked voice of Arya when the ceiling above them exploded. Before anyone could react, several people clad in silver armor roped down through the hole in the ceiling. The explosion sent Gaia and the others stumbling away. Ceiling crumbled down as the silver-armored soldiers landed on the hall. Everyone was caught off guard. Don't move! One of the silver-armored soldiers shouted. GRH! Gaia growled as she picked herself up. Kalubra stood up, grabbing the wall for her support. Once the dwarves realized what just happened, God Dun tried to reach for the weapon. However, a silver-armored soldier dashed at the dwarf, grabbed him by the dwarf's collar, and threw him aside to the other end of the hall. Bastard! Bufug unsheathed his dagger and tried to cut open the soldier who threw away his partner. Rage blinded Bufug, preventing him from seeing the power gap between them. Each silver-armored soldier was at the soul-refining stage. Only the red orc was powerful enough to fight them beside Gaia. But she tried to formulate a plan to escape the auction with the weapon. Boom! The silver-armored soldier went flying onto the wall. Finally, the red orc walked out from the cloud of dust and threw away the soldier like he was nothing. With the orc's size and strength, the silver-armored soldiers stood no chance. At least that's what would have happened if the silver-armored soldiers were alone. Ugh! The red orc roared. His shout alone had enough power to destroy the furniture and push everyone back. Bufug wasted no time as he rushed to the weapon. When the dwarf reached the weapon, Gaia thought he would use that to kill the silver-armored soldiers. However, she was surprised when the dwarf opened up the way they initially came from by pushing a button hidden on the floor. The floor was just a few seconds away from opening and letting the dwarf run away with the weapon. Poor dwarf didn't expect a light beam to strike him from above and throw him off balance. Gaia sensed a powerful being near her, and it wasn't the red orc who was just a few inches away from ripping off a silver-armored soldier's head. Another beam of pure white light struck the ground beside the red orc. The force knocked back the orc, saving the silver-armored soldier. Then, another figure slowly descended to the hall through the hole they blasted, covered in dazzling bright light. Gaia's heart pounded against her chest when she saw Noah Winston. As usual, he wore pure white robes, and his raven-black hair fluttered in the wind. His eyes glimmered with calm and serenity. Since Noah was just as famous as the Dark Lord himself, everyone recognized him almost immediately. It had been some time since Gaia met Noah in person. Some kind of bad luck put Gaia in the same room as the Supreme Guardian himself. Stand down, everyone! Noah's dominant voice swept across the hall. He completely ignored the red orc and announced, "We are here for the dwarves and the prototype. Stand down, and this will be over before you know it," said Noah. He was just as calm as Gaia remembered him. That was one of the few traits Noah and Michael had in common. Both of them would remain calm in situations where most others would completely lose their minds. The red orc was far from listening to Noah and surrendering. Instead of backing off, the red orc made the mistake of thinking he could take on Noah since they were both at the fusion stage. A typical human at the fusion stage would lose the fight against the red orc, not Noah. He was anything but typical. With his big fists cupped, the red orc threw a punch, aiming for Noah's head. Noah waited till the last moment and blocked the red orc's fist with his palm. The ground beneath the orc cracked like an egg when Noah blocked his punch. Before the orc could retaliate, Noah twisted the orc's fist, pulled him closer, and punched him in the chest with enough force to send the red orc flying like a wooden dummy. The other orcs immediately ganged up on Noah and dashed at him from all directions. Noah reacted by stomping the ground with his right foot, creating a shockwave that knocked down the orcs off balance. Then, Noah simply raised his hand as a beam of bright light shot out from his palm and hit an orc right in the chest. "Ah!" The orc cried out in pain before losing consciousness. One by one, Noah knocked out every single orc before their leader could get back to his feet. For a big brute, the red orc was quick to get back to his feet. He simply brushed off the dust from his shoulder and cracked his big neck. "You are making a mistake, human," the red orc talked in his gruff voice. "You already made one," said Noah. "My lady, the Guardians has blocked all the exits. They got this whole place surrounded." Gaia heard Arya through the earpiece. "I still have the teleportation scroll. Don't worry about me. Get your team and get out of here," Gaia whispered. "But Dash, it's an order," Gaia interrupted Arya before she could finish her sentence. Meanwhile, the red orc prepared to battle Noah once again. But this time, he decided to use spells instead of brute force. The orc's eyes shimmered with a strange green glow, just like his veins. It didn't feel like the orc was using only celestial energy to Gaia. Something was amiss. Soon, a thick layer of emerald formed upon the orc, covering him like well-forged armor. The red orc moved toward Noah step by step. Each step he took shook the ground and made the ceiling more unstable. Gaia feared the theater might come falling down on their heads any second. But neither the orc nor Noah seemed to care about the building's structural integrity. Grab the dwarves and secure the weapon and the bidders. I will deal with him, Noah said to his men. Unlike the orc, he didn't cast any spells or equip any armor. Instead, he waited for the orc to make his first move. Finally, the orc rushed at Noah with his fists raised high. My lady, I don't think we can take the weapon anymore. Just please get out of there. We will figure something out later, Gaia heard Azazel. He was worried, and that wouldn't happen so often. If he was worried, Gaia could tell how bad her situation was. Chapter 829 The Power of Locking Out Cultivation. The red orc punched into his fist while cracking his neck. He was ready to give Noah a beat down to death. Facing the big brute orc, Noah remained calm. He didn't even cast a spell. Instead, Noah waited for the red orc to arrive to him. We are leaving, the golden-haired man tried to leave the hall, only to get halted by the silver-armored guardians. These soldiers surrounded everyone to interrogate them later. It would only take a second for Gaia to use the teleportation scroll to escape. However, he couldn't leave the place without finding the real weapon. Kidnapping the two dwarves seemed to be the only option at that moment. Except, the dwarves were already under the control of the silver-armored guardians. Gaia dared not to reveal her identity when Noah was right there in the room with her. Gaia waited for the right moment to strike. Meanwhile, the red orc almost reached Noah. When they had just a meter distance between them, the orc dashed at Noah with his fist aimed at Noah's head. Noah just moved his body to the side without moving his feet. The orc's fist brushed past his face, barely missing his nose by an inch. Then, Noah grabbed the orc's wrist, placed his hand on the orc's chest and boom, a bright beam of light shot out from Noah's palm, sending the orc flying yet again. This time, the orc crashed onto the wall, creating an orc-sized hole in it. Fumes radiated from the orc's chest as Noah's palm got imprinted on his chest. After the orc hit the wall, the entire hall trembled. Stay down, Noah's voice swept across the hall. The red orc did the exact opposite of what just Noah said and got back to his feet. He clubbed his own chest like a pissed-off gorilla before running toward Noah with his eyes burning in rage and violence. Keeping his focus on the orc, Noah kicked a piece of stone crumbed down from the ceiling toward the orc. It was heavy as hell, and if a commoner tried to kick it, every bone in their feet would just snap like a twig. But when Noah kicked it, the stone piece flew like a football and hit the orc right in the head before the orc could defend himself. The orc was stunned for a few moments. Utilizing this opportunity, Noah dashed at the orc, leaped into the air, and kicked the orc with his knees. Arg! The orc growled, stumbling backward. Noah hovered in the air and fired a strong beam of light that knocked down the orc to the ground. On the ground, the red orc struggled and growled in pain. Then, Noah landed straight down on the orc's chest, breaking a couple of the orc's ribs in the process. Although Noah and the orc were at the fusion stage, Noah was far stronger than the orc. He was a god after all. Compared to Michael, Noah had a different path to godhood and possessed different powers. Still, as a god of light, the light beam coming through the hole above them strengthened Noah. Plus, Noah spent a nice chunk of his time honing his battle prowess. Noah stomped the orc with his knee, making the orc cough out blood. He punched the orc repeatedly until the orc's body radiated a glow from within. Suddenly, an explosion went off around the orc. The hall trembled once again as Gaia grabbed the pillar beside her to steady herself. Then, she noticed Noah crashing onto the rubble nearby. The red orc jumped back to his feet. To her surprise, the orc was on fire. He was literally on fire. However, the fire did not hurt the orc. Rather, the crimson red draped on the orc's skin like another set of armor. Before Noah could get back to his feet, the orc readied his hand, sending a stream of scorching hot flames. The curtains around them immediately caught on fire. Soon, the fire spread like wildfire, engulfing everything around them. On the other hand, a wall of ice appeared in front of Noah and protected him from the orc's fire. Ice and fire collided, creating a misty vapor around them. Coupled with the smoke, the mist made it impossible to see a thing in the room. Luckily, it worked in Gaia's favor. She closed her eyes, spreading her senses around. There they are. Gaia located the two dwarves. She sneaked toward the dwarves while Noah was occupied with the orc. You want the dwarves? Gaia's heart skipped a beat when she heard the orc's gruffy voice. She thought the orc was talking to her. But luckily, these words were meant for Noah. She hastened her steps, only to see another orc stumbling toward the two dwarves under the silver-armored soldier's hold. For some reason, her instincts screamed at her. Her legs moved without her control and leaped backward, putting some distance between herself and the dwarves. When she leaped away, she heard another explosion. Something splashed onto her face as she touched the drop of liquid trickling down her cheek. Blood. Gaia saw drops of blood on her hand. Ah! Gaia heard another scream that sounded as loud as a banshee's cry. It sounded like the human woman accompanied the golden-haired man. The orc who approached the dwarves, the explosion and the scream followed by it made Gaia question what just had happened. They are gone. The orc laughed like a devil. As soon as Noah heard the words, the wall of ice before him shattered. The icy shards flew in every direction, impaling wherever they came into contact. Then, a powerful gust of wind shot out of Noah, clearing the mist around them as well as swaying the flame until Noah reached the orc. Killing intent skyrocketed from Noah, seeing the bits of pieces of the dwarves and the silver-armored soldiers. Even the well-forged armor was broken into pieces by the orc, who self-exploded, killing the two dwarves. Noah knew the orcs were dangerous but never anticipated them to self-explode. Both Noah and Gaia were speechless. But for now, Noah had to put an end to the red orc before more and more people died. Since the dwarves exploded along with the orc, Gaia had to change her plans. The two dwarves were the only ones who could have led her to the real weapon. So she turned her focus to the weapon itself. If she could transport it to the dark ocean somehow, she could ask Michael's help in tracking down or building a new one altogether. But stealing the weapons under the Guardian warship and Noah was not a small feat. One by one, the orcs who got knocked out by Noah stood up. Their eyes glimmered with the same emerald-green glow she saw in the red orc's body. One of the orcs rushed to the weapon. After the explosion went near it, the weapon was covered in blood and looked a bit dented. The orc turned the weapon, focusing its mouth on Noah. He was ready to use the weapon to kill Noah. The plan was indeed a good one. Unfortunately, Noah couldn't be killed with typical mortal weapons, according to Michael. The red orc quickly tried to cast a spell and dash out of the weapon's range. Yet he failed as a white sword came out of nowhere and impaled him through his chest. Arg! The orc groaned. After the sword stabbed him, the fire around the orc vanished into thin air. A sudden explosion of energy sent everything and everyone flying. Even Gaia collided against the wall and felt weak just for a brief moment. Even though she had enough strength to get back to her feet, she chose to lie on the ground as everyone else had been groaning and rolling on the ground. They looked worse. Kalubra, who was behind a broken table, looked pale, groaning in pain and trying to get back to her feet. At that moment, when Gaia thought Noah was about to finish the red orc, he did something unimaginable. Noah raised his hand and fired a bright beam of light at the weapon itself. Boom! Gaia almost shouted as the weapon exploded into bits and pieces. The orc who stood behind crashed onto the wall behind him and hit the ground unconscious. What did you do? The red orc gasped. He couldn't believe Noah had just destroyed the weapon. Everyone, including Gaia, thought Noah was here to bring the weapon to the guild along with the dwarves. They were proven wrong by Noah. The red orc's eyes widened in complete shock. He wanted to kill Noah more than anything. One could see the rage and killing lust in his eyes. Jirich! The orc growled when Noah twisted the sword's hilt in the orc's chest. You are coming with me, Saravar, said Noah. The orc struggled to raise his hands as Gaia noticed a strange glow on the center of Noah's forehead. Soon, he cupped the orc's head as a beam of light shot out of Noah's forehead and penetrated the orc's head. This scene reminded Gaia of the time they were in the fire realm. Then, Noah used something similar to lock someone's cultivation. She was lucky enough to see that again. Saravar's fusion stage cultivation slowly declined to the point, in a few moments, he became a commoner. He was not even an arch-sensing stage cultivation at that moment. Instead, he was like someone in the southern continent, void of any arch-energy in his body. The threat Noah posed for them was the realm. Just like Michael had the power to snuff out someone's soul and absorb it, Noah possessed the power to lock someone's cultivation completely. Gaia's neck hair stood up, seeing the orc mumble like a crazy person. Every fiber in her body told her to get out of the place immediately. After all, she had no reason to stick around. The dwarves were dead, and the prototype was in bits and pieces. So if she wasted any more time in the same room with Noah, the Supreme Guardian, she would be in deep trouble. The last thing Gaia wanted for Michael was to devise a plan to infiltrate the Guardians and rescue her. Without a second thought, Gaia took out the teleportation scroll and used it. Noah suddenly turned his gaze toward the place where Gaia was and sensed the space being distorted. Yet the person who used the teleportation scroll was no longer there. Who was that? Noah heard Andreas' voice in his head. "We will know soon enough," said Noah. Chapter 830 The Mind Behind Death Kiss Crossbows. A few days before the auction at Embercrest Entertainment District. In a dimly lit cozy room, Noah sat behind a table, almost buried in scrolls and parchments. Most of them thought being a Supreme Guardian was just hanging around and barking orders. However, the real deal was way different. Noah spent most of his time rummaging through ancient texts, parchments, and scrolls to find out more about the gods and the god-killing weapons. After scouring the entire Azer continent, Noah found some texts indicating a great war between the gods. Some of the gods who led the war against what they called corrupted ones, forged weapons capable of killing corrupted ones as well as themselves. Somehow, Lady Qinzhou got hold of the texts on how to forge these weapons and forged 7 arrows with her friend's help to kill the Dark Lord. The only problem was she forged replicas of these arrows and scattered them throughout the world to confuse the Dark Lord. Noah found 6 of these replicas, and he only had 1 real arrow. He was neck-deep in searching for these arrows until his mother, Diana, ordered him to return home and attend Catherine's baby shower. If that wasn't enough, Noah received disturbing reports that Han Torum dwarves had built a weapon capable enough to cause mass destruction. So now, Noah had to attend the baby shower, search for the arrows and deal with the dwarves. "Noah!" The door slowly creaked open, revealing Alicia's perfect slender figure. She gracefully strolled into the room with an alluring smile. "What is it?" Noah raised his head and was stunned by the beauty of his wife. She looked angelic in the cable light, making his heartbeat rise. As much as Noah liked to focus on the ancient texts, his wife looked too beautiful for him to ignore. He stood up from his chair and stepped closer to her. "Is it me or you look gorgeous today?" asked Noah as he slowly wrapped his arm around Alicia's slender waist. "I think you're being extra cheesy right now," Alicia chuckled but didn't wiggle herself out of his hold. Instead, she moved closer. They could feel each other's warm breath. Their noses brushed together as Alicia's cheeks slowly turned rosy red. "Hammond is waiting for you downstairs. You should meet him," said Alicia. "Did you have any problem rescuing him?" asked Noah. Ever since Alicia had a close encounter with Ghost, Noah had been keeping an eye on Alicia. She was one of the lucky ones who messed with the Dark Lord and lived to tell tales. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said for Peter. What happened to Peter was indeed tragic, and Alicia was partially blamed for his death. Even some of the Belafort family members blamed Alicia for Peter's death and didn't dare to speak against Ghost, who actually killed him. It was easy for them to hate Alicia than speak a word against the Dark Lord. Like it or not, Alicia made an enemy out of Ghost, and Noah would do anything to keep her safe from him. That was the reason why Noah avoided sending Alicia to dangerous missions. "No. But if I didn't know you better, I would say you are trying to keep me away from him. You know his people are everywhere," said Alicia. "That's because corrupting and buying people is easier than we think. I cannot do this without you, Alicia. You won't lose me, Noah. I am not going to go behind your back and try to track down the Dark Lord anymore. But remember your promise. You have to avenge my brother. When the time comes, you need to put those arrows in him and end this play once and for all," said Alicia. Noah shared everything with Alicia except the fact there were replicas of the arrows, which held no power. "I will stop him one way or another." Noah still had second thoughts about killing the Dark Lord. Something deep down blocked Noah from wanting to kill Ghost despite everything he had done. But Noah knew one day, when he and Ghost meet on a battlefield, one of their deaths would be inevitable. "I will hold you to your words. Now go." Alicia gave Noah a peck on the cheek before wiggling out of his hold. Then, Noah walked out of the room, climbing down the stairs to meet Hammond. After climbing down the redwood stairs, Noah came before a door flanked by silver-armored guardians. "Supreme Guardian," The soldiers bowed toward Noah as they opened the door for him. Inside the room, a scrawny young man wearing round glasses was walking back and forth. Anyone could tell the young man was nervous judging by how much he sweated and trembled. The young man was tall, thin, and had curly messy brown hair. He had an aura of intelligence and genius around him. If the Hontorum dwarves knew the young man was here in the Winston Manor, they would storm the place without a second thought. This young man was their goose that lays golden eggs. Granted, the dwarves were talented blacksmiths and builders, but none of them came close to Hammond. The dwarves hated Hammond's intelligence and the fact he was a human. Every weapon the dwarves built for the last 2 years was not theirs to begin with. They belonged to Hammond. He designed them while the dwarves just built them according to Hammond's specifics. "You must be Noah Winston," Hammond said, trembling nervously. "I am Hammond. Hammond Beltrow. You must know that." "I am sorry. How could you not? You are the Supreme Guardian. You know everything," Hammond blabbered nonstop as Noah patted him on the shoulder with a smile to calm him down. "Relax. Take a deep breath. You are safe here. Okay. I'll stop talking and start breathing." Ooh-ha! Hammond started to inhale heavily and exhale as Noah led him to the wooden table. He made Hammond it on, and he sat on the other facing Hammond. "I hope your journey here was pleasant, except for the part where we had to break down your place and knock out a few dwarves. Sorry about that. Well, I am thankful for your rescue. Those dwarves were crazy. I've been held hostage for 2 long years," Hammond stuttered. Noah felt bad for Hammond and wished he had learned about him sooner. "I never wanted my inventions to be used as weapons. But all that the dwarves wanted was more weapons. Weapons that could destroy the elves and their precious empire." Hammond began to blabber once again as Noah flicked his wrist, retrieving a pale yellow pill from his space ring. "Here, take this. It will calm your nerves and help you dash." Noah didn't even finish his sentence when Hammond snatched the pill and swallowed it like a hungry puppy. The pill melted down into Hammond's mouth and in a few seconds, his face regained the natural rosiness. He seemed more relaxed, loosened up, and stopped shaking. "What can you tell me about this new weapon the dwarves have been bragging about?" Noah asked Hammond. "It is not a weapon," Hammond raised his voice. He genuinely seemed angry and upset that Noah thought his invention was a weapon. "I am sorry. It is okay," Noah calmed him down. "Tell me more about it so I can stop the dwarves before they auction your invention to the highest bidder." "That cannot happen. You have to stop it. You must stop it." Noah was surprised that Hammond had started to sweat and tremble again, regardless of the pill he just took. It meant one thing. Hammond was so close to having either a heart attack or a panic attack. Therefore, Noah had to give him another pill to calm his nerves. Just like before, Hammond devoured the second pill in a blink of an eye. "My inventions are not weapons. They are meant to help people who cannot use fancy-mancy magic stuff. Do you know how hard it is for us, those who cannot cultivate to higher stages, to get simple tasks done?" Hammond questioned Noah. Gods played a cruel trick on Hammond's life by giving him over-the-top intelligence to build almost anything, and taking away his ability to cultivate. He was just at the arch-sensing stage 5, and there was no possibility for Hammond to level up. The only good thing that happened in Hammond's life was he ended up in the Empress' many orphanages throughout her empire. He grew up with elves and other orphan humans. It was in the orphanage where Hammond learned to build, design, and nurture his talents. Once he reached the age of 13, Hammond built simple devices for the Empress army and earned enough coins to travel the world as he had always dreamed of. At that time, no one fully realized Hammond's talents. "I built everything to help people, not harm them," Hammond stuttered. "I understand. A sword can be used to cut weeds and heads. It depends on who holds it. I have no doubt you didn't want to harm anyone. But those dwarves, they are organizing a backside auction to sell your latest invention to the highest bidder," Hammond sighed heavily. "It was meant to send messages across kingdoms and even continents using energy waves. At least, that's what I designed it for initially until the dwarves forced me to make some terrible changes. You know the dwarves see destruction in everything. They are consumed by their hatred toward the elves. As much as I'd like to hear more about your invention, I want to know more about what kind of changes you made and what it could do." Hammond hesitated for a moment. He opened and closed his mouth. "You have to tell me. We still have time to fix this," Noah reassured Hammond. And when Hammond looked like he was about to give Noah a lecture on the intricacy of his invention and all the scholarly stuff, Noah rephrased his words. Use simple terms, okay? I am not a brainiac like you. How do I put this simply? Hammond rubbed his chin, simplifying everything in his mind so Noah could understand. After a brief moment of pondering, Hammond finally constructed his sentence. The device I built, it could destroy anyone's organs inside if they were exposed to the energy waves long enough. No defense spell or runes will save you. These energy waves will ignore everything and melt your organs inside. Chapter 831 On to destroy the weapon, despite energy shields and defense spells? Asked Noah. Yes. Nothing would save you. Those energy waves go through anything, including your shields, spells, and anything for that matter, Hammond's answer stunned Noah. If what Hammond said was true, which Noah believed to be true, the harm the device could do was unimaginable. Because of the spells and cultivation stages, a group of people in the lower stages of the cultivation wouldn't go to war against stronger cultivators. At the end of the day, these cultivation stages kept the world peace in a delicate balance. However, this device would change it forever. Suppose someone had mass-produced this device and sold it like typical swords and weapons, cultivation stages wouldn't stop people from going to war against the strong. While the strong could retaliate against and when powerful cultivators fought, it was the commoners in the world that suffers the most damage. The dwarves finished building the device a month ago and forced me to build a prototype to show others what it could do, said Hammond. Where is this device of yours? It's not mine. Not anymore. Mine doesn't kill people. They forced me to change my device to something else. Noah, I mean Supreme Guardians, once the dwarves sell it to the highest bidder, there is no stopping them from mass-producing it. I designed it to be built with common materials and easy to produce for the sake of the poor. Noah rubbed his temples as it turned out to be a bigger problem than he initially thought. He couldn't help imagining the device in the hands of the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord was already rapidly growing in terms of power, influence, and number of soldiers in his army. Once the Dark Lord got hold of the weapon, the advantage the Great Eight clans had would become a thing of the past. Tell me, Hammond, Noah leaned forward. Do you think your device could kill a half-immortal or people above it? Hammond went silent for a moment to think about Noah's question. To be honest, Hammond didn't think who was the strongest his device could kill as much as he thought how far his device could send messages. Theoretically, it's possible. After you reach the half-immortal stage, your body goes through changes both physically and mentally. I haven't seen the dwarves putting a half-immortal against their weapon. But with enough resources, time, and talent, they could modify it to be effective against half-immortals too. It is possible. Oh God, what have I done? Hammond gasped and stuttered, realizing the potential threat his invention could cause. Time, resources, and talent are what the dwarves have in abundance, Noah sighed. Listen to me, Supreme Guardian. You have to find it and destroy it. Don't think of using it against the Dark Lord or his army. Nothing good will come from that. Noah wasn't sure of that, but he made no promise to Hammond. Instead, he questioned Hammond. Let's just say I find it and destroy it as you said. What's stopping the dwarves from building the weapon again from scratch? Asked Noah. The dwarves may haven't designed the weapon, but they built it with their own hands. If Noah's experience with dwarves was anything, he knew they could build the weapon later on. My blueprints. They have them in a secured safe with the weapon itself. If you destroy those, the dwarves won't be able to build it again. It's too complex for them to build it again using guesswork. Where is it? Asked Noah to see Hammond shake his head. I only knew it was somewhere in Dalgarum. They didn't give me a room with windows to see what was going on outside. I was a prisoner to them. A few minutes later, Alicia and Norvin entered the room with a map of Dalgarum. They placed the map on the table between Noah and Hammond. Hammond, you are going to help us locate the weapon and the blueprints. Let's begin with the size of the weapon, said Noah. How big is it? Can you fit in a room? Hammond shook his head. More like you need a hall, a spacious one at that. Like a throne hall, said Hammond. Noah picked up the quill, drenched it in ink, and circled a few areas in the map. They all had paces which had halls big enough like a typical throne hall. Norvin's brows arched up, seeing Noah had actually circled the Dwarven King's palace itself. What's the size of the prototype you mentioned that the dwarves built? It's smaller compared to the real thing. The last time I saw it, it was the size of a carriage. Noah rubbed his clean-shaven chin. They couldn't have openly transported through the stress. Our men would have noticed it. They must have used the underground tunnels. Dalgarum had more underground tunnels than the hares in Norvin's true form. When the dwarves were at war with the elves several hundred of years ago, they built these tunnels to transport weapons and men, avoiding the elven eyes. Then after the war ended, they used these tunnels to transport goods throughout the kingdom. With time, many of the underground passages got forgotten, and their maps just disappeared. However, the rumor was the Han Torum still possessed the full map of the underground passage. With a flick of his wrist, Noah took out a translucent parchment and placed it above the Dalgarum map. The candlelight illuminated the various webs of lines running throughout the kingdom. Is that what I think it is? Norvin's eyes widened in shock. Yes. Every dwarf indeed has a price, said Noah. Obviously, he was not proud of bribing a dwarf, but he had no choice. Unfortunately, it wasn't gold coins he used to bribe the dwarf but a favor. So when the time came, Noah had to repay the favor. Noah felt the price was worth it if he could stop a mass destruction weapon from falling into the wrong hands. After Noah placed the underground tunnel map on the Dalgarum map, he noticed several tunnels running beneath the area he had circled previously. A smile merged with Noah's smile as he figured out the place where the dwarves were holding the weapon. He knew the dwarves were holding an auction in the entertainment district in Embercrest. Since the prototype was the size of a carriage, he established that they had to move it through the tunnels. And only one circled place was connected to the theater through a tunnel, the shipyard. You said your room had no windows, right? Have you noticed metal rust quickly in your room? Asked Noah, although he knew what would be Hammond's answer. Bow that you ask me, yes. The dwarves mostly used wood, but when my inventions required the iron, and they indeed rusted a bit sooner than I used to. That was because you were close to the ocean, said Noah. Realization hit Hammond as he figured out why the dwarves were so adamant about moving the weapon to a safer environment. As much as Hammond knew his inventions, he lacked the people skills to read people and predict their behavior like Noah. Norvin, gather the team and tell them we are moving out in 10 minutes, Noah ordered Norvin. He then turned his gaze toward Alicia. Keep him safe. As far as the dwarves are concerned, Hammond died in the accident. To the rest, Hammond doesn't exist. No matter what, the Dark Lord or his army cannot learn we have him. The moment Hammond heard Noah mention the Dark Lord, he shuddered. You think the Dark Lord might target me? Why? Oh my God. What did I do? Shit. Hammond collapsed on the chair behind him. He sweated bullets as his entire body trembled uncontrollably. Shit, he is having a panic attack, Alicia coldly said. Norvin was actually surprised that even a hostage like Hammond had heard about the Dark Lord enough to have a panic attack when he learned the Dark Lord might target him. It was quite shocking for Norvin to see people pissing their pants just by the mere mention of the Dark Lord's name. After Ghost revealed himself as the Dark Lord and destroyed the entire island of Ithilien, some people refused even to address him by his name, Ghost. More and more people were joining in this fear parade and addressing him only as the Dark Lord. Even some of the Guardians weren't an exception to this. Noah immediately tossed the pill into Hammond's mouth and calmed his nerves. 3 pills. Noah used 3 pills, and they were quite powerful. Still, Hammond took them like candies. Relax, take a deep breath, Noah slowly said to Hammond. We will keep you safe. He won't get to you because he doesn't know you exist. Besides, he is in the demon's grave. So you are safe here. Noah's words somehow calmed Hammond. He had that certain effect on people since he was the god of light. His aura could bring hope and calmness to everyone, just like Michael's aura could bring our fear and hopelessness. You will soon be relocated to one of our safe houses, and no one will ever bother you again. You will be able to work on your inventions that make the world a better place, not weapons to do the opposite. You have my word, Noah promised Hammond. Alicia knew most of the Guardians, and even Andreas would disagree with Noah. Instead of wasting Hammond's talents inventing things that helps the commoners, they would prefer building new, more powerful weapons that could give them an edge in the fight against the Dark Lord. A world without the Dark Lord was a better world for everyone, including commoners. But Noah did not think like that. He knew any weapon they created with Hammond's talents would eventually land in the wrong hands, especially when people were so easy to bribe and blackmail. Noah did not want to take that chance. After calming down Hammond and leaving him with Alicia, Noah, and Norvin left the room and returned to Noah's room. Next stop, the shipyard in Dalgarum, said Noah before activating the teleporter array in his room. Chapter 832 Noah's reluctance to capture the Dark Lord after leaving the Winston Manor via teleportation array. Noah appeared in an empty room lit with candles. This was one of the Guardian Guild's safe houses in Dalgarum. The Guardian Guild had safe houses everywhere except in the Dark Ocean, obviously. A circular chakra with countless intricate runes and symbols glowed underneath Noah's feet. He stepped out of the chakra as his team appeared in the room one by one. "Everyone is here," said Norvin. He quickly transformed into his true form and leaped onto Noah's shoulder. Dark curtains blocked the sunlight from entering the room. Noah went to the windows and slightly moved it to see the ocean through the glass. The crystal blue ocean stretched endlessly into the horizon. Everywhere he looked, the dwarves littered the complexly planned streets. This complexity was about to make Noah's life much easier. Since it was still midday, most of the dwarves were at their work and not terrorizing the streets. "What's the plan, Supreme Guardian?" Neela, a fledgling guardian, asked Noah. She was one of Noah's elites handpicked to be on his team. The 12 guardians in the room served and answered only to Noah. They might not be as strong as the Alpha Guardians or many in the guild, but each of them was loyal, incorruptible, and upheld the Guardian Guild's morals like their lives depended on it. To fight evil and win against corruption, Noah needed more than cultivation power. He needed soldiers with morals. He planned to make them the next generation of great elders who fought beside Andreas. Of course, Noah had the option to resurrect the elite elder guardians with the keys scattered throughout the world. However, Noah avoided searching for the keys regardless of Andreas' words. Because lately, Noah and Andreas had more disagreements and arguments than usual. Noah didn't want the elder guardians to join Andreas and sway him to do something he was against. Besides, Noah barely had enough time to search for the arrows Qin forged. Unlike Michael, Noah preferred to get things done with his own hands instead of sending the guardians. Nothing too complicated. Hit the shipyard, find the weapon the dwarves built and the blueprints, destroy them, and get out of there before Han Torum learns we were there, Noah simplified the plan. Hearing his plan, Neela removed the silver helmet, revealing her squared face with fiery red hair. Freckles spread around her nose and cheekbones like sprinkles on a cake. They added an extra layer to the red-haired beauty. Although she was nowhere close to Zanali or Alicia in terms of beauty, Neela had a warrior spirit that Noah admired. She was a valuable asset and a good friend to him. "But Supreme Guardian, are we going to destroy the blueprints alone or the weapon too?" asked Neela. The silvered armored soldiers focused on Noah, waiting for his answer. Instead of giving them a quick answer, Noah looked at the blue ocean through the window. He focused on the rhythmic waves to achieve a sense of peace both physically and mentally. "Both. If we take this weapon, someone else will create a countermeasure. It would eventually lead them to build a more powerful weapon. Then another countermeasure and another more powerful weapon. Eventually, it will become a cycle until we have nothing but wars on our hands. It might sound dramatic in my imagination at this point, but I promise you, it will happen," Noah explained to Neela, paused for a moment, and continued. "I don't think the Dark Lord will destroy the weapon. In fact, he will use it against us in a heartbeat," said Norvin, resting upon Noah's shoulder. "Exactly my point. I am not him, and we won't use such a brutal killing machine against anyone, including the people in his army. They deserve punishment, not death," said Noah. "Can I speak my mind, Supreme Guardian?" asked Neela. Noah nodded. He always allowed his team to speak freely and listened to them instead of outright shutting them down. Noah believed to be an effective team, communication was vital. When the final war with the Dark Lord arrives, people will die, Supreme Guardian. Both sides will suffer casualties. Deaths are inevitable. This weapon might be the edge we need against the Dark Lord. Wars are won by soldiers, not by weapons. If you believe in a weapon more than yourself, you need to reevaluate yourself, Noah said calmly about what he truly believed in. "Before we leave, when are we going to address the elephant in the room?" Norvin turned his gaze toward Noah. "What?" asked Noah. "We never talked about the Dark Lord knowing about the auction. We knew Valmos went missing, presumably dead, who had supposedly received an invitation to participate in the Han Torum auction. And we never found the invitation on his body. You and I both know Gaia written all over the dead bodies," said Norvin. "If she killed them, there is a good chance she would attend the auction, Supreme Guardian. We can nab Saravar and the Dark Queen herself." "Two birds in one stone," Neela suggested, but Noah brushed it off with a smile. "Just imagine what Ghost would do if we captured his love of life. Just imagine." Norvin closed his eyes for a moment and only saw death and destruction. Fear crept down Norvin's spine, just imagining the Dark Lord bringing his wrath, as Noah said. Not to mention it's Gaia we are talking about. If capturing her was that easy, Zanali and Nagaland would have done it by now. Until I am certain something could hold either of them, I am not going to risk trying to capture them. It has only led to death. This was the biggest reason why Andreas and Noah had such arguments lately. On the one hand, Noah believed it was not wise to try to capture the Dark Lord without finding a way to hold him down. On the other hand, Andreas argued that the more they leave the Dark Lord alone, the stronger he would become and the harder it would be to capture him later. In a sense, both of them were right. Even Skyhall was dumbstruck after Michael escaped the cage that was designed to keep him restrained. Not only did he escape, but he also killed Peter inside the very cage that Alicia put him in. Every time they tried to capture him, they ended up with more blood on their hands. Hence, Noah decided to let the Dark Lord be until he finds a way to stop him permanently. Enough talking. Let's go and finish the task at our hand. Noah waved his hands as he prepared to leave the room. When he talked about the Dark Lord and Gaia, he noticed a sliver of fear in everyone's eyes, including Norvin's. That fear was the Dark Lord's most powerful weapon, and Noah knew he must find a way to break this fear. As long as the people feared the Dark Lord, they would be easy to brainwash and sway to the dark side. After leaving the safe house, Noah and his team used the dark alleyways to reach the sea without drawing much attention. As Noah stood on golden grains of sand, he looked up at the brilliant sky adorned with dazzling blue color and puffy clouds that formed different shapes in the sky. The goddess-like sun's face was being embraced by the demure navy fingertips of the skyline. The small crystals in the sand glimmered and twinkled brilliantly against the sun rays. Away from the immense sea, white foams from the waves gathered gently onto the golden shore. Every sight and sound stimulated a sense of composure and serenity. The effect was heightened by the absence of the noisy bustle of guardians complaining, rummaging of scrolls, and Andreas lectures, only to be exposed to the never-ending music of the waves and to breathe the fresh air instead of the stale atmosphere of his room. It was not easy to describe the effect of this sight, but it could only be strangely deciphered in his mind. His team was ordered to equip normal clothes instead of silver armor, which would most definitely draw attention from the dwarves. Eventually, Noah reached the ocean, where he saw a couple of dwarven kids building sandcastles. The sight of children playing without a worry in the world warmed Noah's heart. Looking at them made him want to destroy the weapon even more. If the weapon fell into the wrong hands and they started to slaughter people with it, the blame would ultimately fall on the dwarves. It was not fair to blame all the dwarves for something a few dwarves filled with hatred had done. While Noah was drowned in the serenity of the beach in thoughts, one of the dwarven children noticed Noah. She waved at Noah, showing no hatred and hostility toward humans. This was the world Noah had been trying to create lately, a world without hatred and fear toward one another. In fact, he was more focused on solving disputes between races and helping commoners than dealing with the Dark Lord and his army. Noah waved back at the kid, which brightened the kid's face like someone had lit a candle inside her head. Then before the other kids could notice Noah, he disappeared into the ocean with his team. Instead of going to the shipyard on foot, they decided to go underwater. That way, the element of surprise would be on their side, and they could catch the dwarves before they alert Han Torum. Hammond and the weapons he helped the dwarves build were off-the-books operation. So even if the Guardian Guild infiltrated it and stole the weapon, Han Torum couldn't retaliate directly because such an operation doesn't exist officially. However, Noah planned to keep the guild out of the picture because the last thing he wanted was a cold war between the Guardian Guild and Han Torum. At this point, any conflict the Guardian Guild gets into would benefit the Dark Lord more than anything. Noah and his team were quick swimmers. They managed to reach the shipyard, which was built in the water, in a few minutes. But before emerging from the water, Noah closed his eyes, spreading his senses around the area to locate the dwarves in the shipyard. Having no idea a team of guardians was under them, the dwarves continued with their day-to-day work, which was building ships and a weapon of mass destruction. Chapter 833. The elves did it from a bird's view. The shipyard was built in a way that would look like a giant T. The left side of the shipyard had a frigate almost finished being built, and the other side had a man-o'-war. The dwarves were building these ships under the king's order. Although Han Torum was one of the great 8 clans, their leader was the king himself, unlike the Guardian Guild, where the leader was no king but was called Supreme Guardian, who answered to no king. Meanwhile, The straight platform stretching toward the ocean contained materials needed to build the ships. It had a warehouse and a giant forge that fumed heat and ash. Noah could hear the dwarves hitting metal with their hammers. Thanks to his senses, he located 6 dwarves on guard. 2 dwarves stood on the shipyard's edge, looking at the ocean. 2 more dwarves patrolled the forge while another 2 dwarves stood on either side of the roof with their crossbows. Noah swam toward a cargo ship docked at the shipyard and slowly emerged from the water. Luckily, the cargo ship was the size of a small fishing ship and had no dwarves on board. It was empty as far as Noah could see. "I count 6 dwarves, Supreme Guardian," Neela whispered after emerging from the water. "No more calling me by my rank or name," Noah said to Neela and the others. "Position yourself to take out the dwarves at the same time. Wait for my signal." "As you wish," Neela said before merging into the water once again. His team was competent, and he didn't need to micromanage them every single time. They coordinated among themselves and positioned them from where they could take out the dwarves with blow darts. These darts were laced with Noah's own concoction, a powerful knockout serum. Since all these dwarves were at the body strengthening stage, they only had to use a small dosage. Is it true the Dwarf King is only a core formation warrior? How could they be one of the great 8 clans when their leader is just a core formation warrior? Norvin asked Noah. Don't underestimate the dwarves by their weak cultivation power. They substitute that with connections, wealth, and their superior dwarven engineering. Also, have you heard of Moguls, the mercenary guild? The dwarves in there aren't weak. They use some kind of blood ritual to boost their cultivation. While the team was taking their position, Noah discussed the dwarves with Norvin. When it came to what was happening in Aur, Norvin pretty much had no idea. He was learning the power dynamics and the other racers in Aur little by little. So Norvin seemed a little ignorant to some in the guild. Noah noticed Neela and his team raising their thumbs, indicating they were in position. They waited for his signal as Noah leaned to the side, taking another look at the dwarves. Then, he snapped his fingers, creating a quick flash of light. This flash was the signal. And the moment the team saw it, they raised their blowguns, blew into it, and sent a dart soaring through the air. Ouch! Blimey! One of the dwarves slapped his neck as he felt a sting. But there was something between his hand and neck. The dwarf pulled it out to see a tiny town-inch arrow made of what seemed to be silver. In a blink of an eye, the serum kicked in as the dwarves rolled their eyes upwards before collapsing down. "Move!" Noah ordered the team as he leaped out of the water and dashed into the shipyard. Although the shipyard where the dwarves build secret weapons, they didn't put too many dwarves to guard. They believed too many guards would draw unwanted attention to the place. Hence, they had few guards, and they never opened their mouths about the underground facility, even when they were drunk. Their secrecy worked in Noah's favor. Inside the shipyard, he saw countless ship parts and giant chains hanging from the ceiling. Everywhere he turned, he saw nothing but metal, ship parts, wood, and empty mugs. Norvin leaped onto a chain above and looked around the shipyard to locate the underground passage. The dwarves might be drunk and hot-headed but not stupid enough to keep the weapon in plain sight. Norvin's eyes glistened like rubies as he used magical perception to see through the shipyard. Everything seemed normal and not out of place until his gaze fell on a golden train running down from a lever hidden behind a stack of wooden crates. "There," Norvin pointed his finger at the wood crates as Noah and the team slowly sneaked toward it. Meanwhile, they noticed a couple of dwarves walking toward them. They fell down as fast as they entered the room. Noah turned and saw Neela with the blowgun. Her reaction was too fast to the point none of her teammates realized that she had just fired 2 blow darts. Noah gave a nod of approval before turning his gaze back to Norvin. "Knock out everyone and meet me down," said Noah. Since Norvin's true form was small and he could move around the shipyard without getting detected, Noah tasked Norvin with knocking out the dwarves. Even if he somehow got caught, the dwarves wouldn't connect this to the Guardians. After all they saw was a monkey. Speaking of being a monkey, Norvin took out a brown pill from his space ring and tossed it into his mouth. As soon as the pill melted down, his golden fur turned mud brown. Without the shiny golden fur, he looked like a regular monkey. "Go ahead," Norvin whispered, turned around, and leaped toward the shipyard's left side, where they were building a frigate. "Follow me," Noah said to his team as they slowly sneaked toward the crates. When they reached the stack of crates neatly placed on top of each, Noah slightly moved the stacks. The wooden crates were surprisingly heavy, which made Noah wonder what was inside of them. The crates moved, making a creaking sound. Then the lever was exposed. However, it was not the typical lever that, when pulled down, would open a door. Instead, this lever made of thick, black metal had numerous tiny gears, nuts and bolts. On top of that, there were 6 keyholes beside the lever. "Should we search those dwarves? They might have the keys," said Neela. Noah nodded as the team swiftly moved away from Noah to search the dwarves. A few minutes later, Neela and the others returned to Noah. Unfortunately, they came empty-handed. "We found no keys, Supreme Guardian. All they had was their swords and mugs." Neela creased her sword-sharp brows. They thought coming here empty-handed would disappoint Noah. On the contrary, he just smiled. Honestly, he expected the dwarves to have some kind of mechanism to protect the entrance. Otherwise, it would be too easy for anyone to enter their secret lair. Fortunately for him and unfortunately for the dwarves, Noah possessed a primordial flame. Neela's face brightened with the blue flames dancing above Noah's hands. No matter how many times they had witnessed the blue flames, they still had the same dumbfounded look on their faces when Noah conjured the flames for the zillionth time. The flame had a certain effect on the guardians. The heavenly flames had a radiant energy that made them calm, courageous, and fearless. Under their gazes, Noah moved the ball of heavenly flames toward the lever and let the heat creep into the keyholes. The metal slowly turned blue to the color of the flame. Inch by inch, the heavenly flames melted down the lock, and then the lock clicked. Noah pushed open the door, revealing a dimly lit staircase that led to the dwarven secret lair. But the opening came with a catch. They weren't built with humans and long-legged species in mind. Instead, it was meant for the dwarves to use. Hence, the doorway was only 4 feet tall. Noah crouched down and entered the doorway, followed by his team. They were careful not to make any sounds until they could locate the weapon and the dwarves guarding it. After climbing down almost 50 steep steps, everyone, including Noah, felt a chill running down their spines. Hammond wasn't kidding when he said the weapon was massive in size. It was almost the size of a frigate. Compared to it, the prototype was just a baby. The weapon didn't even need to be powered up, but if someone simply blew into one end, the bell-shaped mouth would amplify the volume loud enough to kill several commoners. "Put on your masks," Noah ordered the team. He saw several dwarves and no way of knocking them out without getting caught. One by one, Noah's team put on a porcelain mask resembling the face of a mannequin. When they wore the masks, their ears grew a few inches outwards, making them look pointy and elven-like. Those who look at Noah's team would immediately believe they were elves wearing masks. The dwarves and elves hated each other for all reasons, and Noah didn't think adding one more to the pile wouldn't make much of a difference. Initially, he considered using black skull masks to portray themselves as the Dark Lord's army. But after thinking of the dwarves' nature of hot-headedness, he immediately removed that idea from his head. Because if the dwarves went against the Dark Lord, he would kill them, and he would reduce their entire clan to the ground without a shred of mercy. Noah slowly walked forward, stretching his arms and neck. "Stop what you're doing, you filthy animals!" Noah's thunderous voice swept across the yard. He was quite good at the way elves would speak to the dwarves in a situation like this. The dwarves almost jumped from their feet when they heard the sudden voice. They immediately jumped down from the weapon, rushed out from the corners, and climbed down through the chains with their battle axes in hand. Bloody elves! The dwarves were more furious than they were shocked. Just the sight of pointy ears made their blood boil. The dwarves didn't even mind the huge cultivation gap between them. That was why the dwarves were often called hot-blooded and borderline stupid when it came to a battle. "Kill those fucking pointy-eared fucks!" One of the dwarves raised his battle axe, crying out loud. Chapter 834 Save or Destroy the Weapon. The dwarves let out a battle cry that echoed through the entire space. They rushed at Noah and his group without regard for their lives. Just the sight of pointy ears in their domain twisted something inside the dwarves. Their killing intent skyrocketed as a dwarf threw his battle axe at Noah. The axe soared through the air, but Noah simply flicked his wrist as the axe froze in the air, turned around, and flew straight back to the dwarf. Only, the dwarf couldn't stop the axe. It hit the dwarf straight on the head, knocking him out cold in an instant. Noah's team scattered around the space in a blink of an eye. Each used their own speed spell to enhance their speed to the point the dwarves barely saw them. Wind rustled every time Noah's team ran past them. The previously silent workshop of the dwarves turned into a battle zone. Without being able to see the intruders, the dwarves swung their axes left and right blindly. Stay still and fight us motherfuckers. I want them dead. The dwarves screamed as loud as they could. Suddenly, a dwarf froze for a moment before falling down. It happened so quickly. One moment he was fine, and the next, he fell to the ground like a lump of coal. Instead of reaching for their fallen comrades, the dwarves roared at Noah and his team, whom the dwarves couldn't see anymore. What have you done? You will pay for this. The dwarves boiled in rage as their eyes looked like they were about to pop out of their sockets. Their roars could be heard from anywhere in the space. Soon, the dwarves fell one by one. Noah wasn't wasting any more time on the dwarves. He knocked the wind out of many dwarves just with his fists. Eventually, Noah and his team knocked out every dwarf in the hall and gathered before the weapon. Any idea how to destroy this without making a fuss? Too much fuss, I mean, said Neela. Before we destroy the weapon, look for a safe. It must be here somewhere, said Noah. Noah's team nodded before heading out to search for the safe, leaving Noah with the weapon. Noah started to walk around the weapon in the hope of trying to get a better understanding of the weapon. He wondered how Hammond came up with such a bizarre contraption to exchange messages between two places without the use of arch energy. As he reached the weapon's back, he noticed a door. Noah twisted the golden knob, opening the door. When the door opened, his face was illuminated by the jars lined up inside. His neck hair stood up due to the electric energy coming from the jars. There were almost 50 jars, and each had balls of lightning inside. Lightning in a bottle. Who would have thought that? Noah smiled. Noah tried to pull out a jar, but they were held in place by a magnetic field. So this is what powers up the weapon. How in the hell did these dwarves manage to catch lightning in bottles? Say whatever about the dwarves, they never ceased to amaze Noah with their innovations. Granted, Hammond was on another level compared to the dwarves, but it didn't mean the dwarves were incompetent. It was just their hatred toward the elves that got the better of them and forced them to kidnap Hammond. Still, Noah felt like he was missing something in this whole story. He couldn't put his finger into what it was, but his gut told me he was missing something, a crucial piece of the puzzle. While his team was turning the place upside down, searching for a safe, Noah pulled out a jar from the power compartment and put it in his space ring. He had a feeling this might come in handy later. After closing the compartment, Noah continued to walk around the weapon. When he walked a full circle around it, Neela returned to him with a proud grin on her face. We found it, said Neela. Lead the way. Noah sighed in relief inside. He was glad everything had gone according to plan till now. The red-haired beauty led Noah to the safe that was located in a small room. When Noah entered the brightly lit room, he was welcomed by a long oak table, chairs tall enough to accommodate dwarves, and numerous racks filled with parchment and scrolls. Whoever occupied the room didn't give a damn about tidiness. Everything was lying around out of order. It would be a miracle if anyone could find something in the room. The parchment and papers on the ground rustled as they entered the room. There it is. Neela pointed at the safe built inside the wall to Noah. Just like the lever they used to get into this area, the safe had several keyholes as well as tiny gears. If Noah wanted to get the blueprints unharmed, he would have bothered to look for the keys. Since he was here to obliterate the plans, he just went to the safe and sent a stream of heavenly flames into the keyholes. The entire safe melted down like butter in a few moments. Then, Noah turned his focus onto the bigger problem, the weapon itself. How do you plan to destroy it? Asked Neela. With these. They heard Norvin's voice. When they turned to the doorway, they saw Norvin, walking toward them in his human form. He carried a red oak barrel on his shoulder. Explosives. I found this in a room. Apparently, it's a new kind of explosive, more powerful and more stable. At least that's what I heard from the dwarves before I knocked them out cold, said Norvin. Push this baby into the weapon and watch it go kaboom. Problem solved. Norvin placed the barrel heavily on the ground as Noah's team almost leaped out of the room. I told you. It's stable. Stop messing around, said Noah with an amused smile. I will take care of destroying the weapon. You guys go ahead and get the dwarves to safety. I don't want them to get caught in the blast, said Noah. If it was Michael, he wouldn't have bothered with saving the dwarves. They built weapons to kill people, so they deserve to die. That would have been Michael's argument. Luckily for the dwarves, Noah wasn't a vengeful god like Michael. He was merciful. I will signal you when we get them to safety, said Norvin before leaving the room with Noah's team. After they left, Noah carried the barrel to the weapon. With a simple leap, Noah reached the weapon's mouth and slowly rolled the barrel down after he attached a rope around the barrel. Noah hovered around the weapon waiting for Norvin's signal. Almost 5 minutes later, Noah heard a roar in the distance. Noah could recognize that roar in his sleep. That was Norvin in his true golden baboon form. Only a few people had seen his true form, which stood 8 feet tall and quite terrifying to look at. "That's my cue," Noah mumbled as he raised a hand toward the roof. Then, a beam of light shot through the roof, creating a hole wide enough for Noah to escape through. He slowly hovered toward the hole with the rope attached to the explosive barrel in his hand. When he was just a few meters away from the hole in the roof, Noah snapped his fingers as sparks flew into the rope. Blue fire immediately engulfed the rope and traveled through the rope like a blue dragon. Eventually, the flame traveled into the weapon, away from Noah's sight. For a few moments, nothing happened. Noah just waited for something to happen in utter silence. The silence only lasted for a few moments though. Boom! Noah heard the sound of a muffled explosion. In a blink of an eye, fire streamed out of the weapon's mouth, and the weapon exploded into bits and pieces. The sheer force of the explosion alone sent Noah flying directly through the hole. Norvin wasn't kidding when he said the explosive was more powerful. A single barrel was enough to destroy a colossal weapon to pieces and shake the entire building. Noah felt truly lucky that he put the barrel into the weapon instead of making it explode outside it. If that were the case, the explosion would have been several times more powerful and destroyed the entire building along with the adjacent buildings. Dark smoke rose to the sky itself, forming a giant cloud above the building. Noah used the cloud of smoke to his advantage and flew away from the place. While he was flying away, he saw more and more dwarves running toward the fire instead of away from it. He felt pity for the dwarves. But luckily, Noah cleared the building before setting up the explosion. His task here was done without a hiccup. Good thing Andreas used all his soul energy, brewing special potions for Noah. Otherwise, they would have had a huge argument about whether to destroy the weapon or not. By the time the higher-ups from Han Torum appeared at the shipyard, Noah and his team were long gone. All the dwarves they knocked out pointed at one group, the elves. As a result, the Empress would have a long discussion with her ministers and schedule another secret meeting with none other than the Dark Lord himself. Chapter 835 The Inside Man of the Dark Lord. A few days after Noah destroyed the weapon and the prototype. As evening cast her dusky gown, when the air became fresh and restful, the time of joyful reflection arrived. The brightly lit city of Ice Fair met the peach sky. The evening arrived in stately fashion, with all the grace of a breeze in repose. Mila was on her way to meet her friend and fellow teammate, Alvaro Torres. He lived alone in Ice Fair and worked hard to get to Noah's team. The cobblestone pavement was littered with people of all manners. It wouldn't be an understatement to say the Ice Fair was the hub of Kingdom Kethern. People came from everywhere to Ice Fair to enjoy their time and buy rare things. One could argue that Ice Fair was the second safest place after Penn Town, where the Supreme Guardian resided. Neela wore white robes and put on her hood to cover her face. Some unruly hooligans were fighting and rolling on the ground. Neela walked around a cart that barely avoided the two hooligans. She was on her way to Alvaro Torres to talk about collecting information on potential targets who might be helping the Dark Lord. Everyone in Noah's team was ordered to pursue information about the Dark Lord's subordinates in their free time. However, they were strictly ordered against going after them without Noah's permission. Considering Neela was an ambitious girl, she chose the Dark Lord's head of information gathering as her target. Noah and Alicia believed the Dark Lord had someone powerful, connected, and influential working under him who was responsible for recruiting people into their course as well as gathering information. Neela had a few strong suspects, including Sadie Kaplan, the Silver Moon prodigy. Unfortunately, everyone on Neela's list had higher positions in prominent clans or organizations. Interrogating them without any evidence was equal to killing her own career. That was where Alvaro Torres came into the picture. Alvaro Torres' aunt was an elder in Silvermoon, and Neela hoped to use his aunt to get a meeting with Sadie Kaplan, the most suspicious one on her list. Among the suspects, Sadie Kaplan had the closest relationship with Ghost and was the most likely candidate who would have been brainwashed by him. After navigating her way through the crowd, she finally arrived at the edge of the city where the nobles tended to live. Bright crystal orbs lit the square with its radiant blue light as Neela turned left and strolled straight into the path that had the sign Torres Manor. Since it was evening and most of the patrons were either drinking in taverns or immersing themselves in pleasuring activities, The path to Torres Manor was void of people. Peach trees accompanied Neela on either side of the path as she enjoyed the calm and peaceful stroll. Soon, she noticed an elegant manor at the end of the road. From the outside, the Torres Manor looked cozy. It was built with walnut wood and has granite decorations. Small, octagon windows added to the overall look of the house and have been added to the house in a fairly asymmetrical pattern. The manor was shaped like an L. The extension extended into overhanging wooden panels reaching the end of that side of the house. The second floor was bigger than the first, which created a stylish overhang on two sides of the house. This floor had a slightly different style than the floor below. The manor itself surrounded a gorgeous garden with many hidden lights that made the garden come to life at night. As she reached closer to the manor, she noticed two large chimneys sitting at the side of the manor. They fumed gray smoke, which indicated to Neela that Alvaro was home. Neela knocked on the door. "Alvaro." Neela gently tapped the wooden door. She heard a rustling noise coming from within as though Alvaro was rummaging through some parchments. Did I hear a girl's voice? Neela questioned herself. She could swear she heard a girl's voice coming from inside, but it couldn't be since Alvaro was single. "Alvaro." Neela knocked again. This time, she added a bit of force. For a few moments, Neela heard nothing. She slowly reached for the dagger dangling underneath her cloak. Even a few moments of silence were enough for fear to creep down their spines. As Supreme Guardians elites, they didn't have the luxury of taking things simply. The Dark Lord was known to strike when least expecting. So, Neela's heart and mind feared the worst. Luckily, Alvaro put her mind and heart to rest as he opened the door with his usual grin. Alvaro was a brown-haired youngster with a stubble beard. He was neither too tall nor too short, with a medium-built body. While he was not in the silver armor, he used to wear rather ordinary clothes, like black trousers and a loose-fit cotton shirt that revealed his chiseled chest and muscles. "What were you doing in there?" Neela didn't wait for Alvaro to invite her in. Instead, she pushed him aside and let herself in. Once she entered the room, she was greeted with a cozy fireplace, a comfy sofa set, and a puffy carpet that blanketed the wooden floor. "Please do come in." Alvaro rolled his eyes as he shut the door behind them. Neela plunged herself into the sofa and removed the cloak. "I swear I heard a girl's voice in there. Are you hiding one, Alvaro?" Neela teased Alvaro. "Look under the sofa," said Alvaro with a hint of sarcasm in his voice. Neela leaned forward and pretended to look under the sofa. "I bought a crate of ale from Embercrest." "You want a mug?" asked Alvaro as he went to the kitchen on the corner. "Where in the hell did you get the time to buy ale from the dwarves?" Neela turned around to see Alavro taking out a jade bottle from a wooden crate and pouring its content into two large mugs. The sweet aroma from the ale made her mouth water. Alvaro brought the two mugs to the sofa and sat beside her after handing over one mug to Neela. "Cheers." "We deserve it." Alvaro clanked his mug against Neela's. "Yes, we do indeed. We made quite a mess in Dalgarum. Good thing the dwarves have no idea it was us. They are gonna hate the elves even more now, even though I don't know how they can hate them more," said Neela, taking a long sip from the mug, enjoying every bit of the dwarven brewed ale. Her taste buds danced in her tongue and thanked her wholeheartedly. "I gotta give credit to the dwarves. They do know how to brew good ale. I just wish Grayson was here with us," Neela signed. Grayson was one of the two guardians who lost their lives when the orc's self exploded. If it weren't for the silver armor, more guardians would have lost their lives that day. They felt truly lucky for the armor and the runes engraved in it. To Grayson and Kian, Alvaro raised his mug, toasting for their dead comrades. "And about that favor." Neela's voice trailed off. "It's on. You have been invited to the Silver Moon beverage party thanks to Aunt Tegan. You owe me one, and if you mess this up somehow, you don't know me," Alvaro chuckled. "I want to hug you." "Please don't." Alvaro raised both his hands to defend himself from Neela's hug. "Please remember everyone is innocent until proven guilty. You don't know if Sadie is in bed with him or not." "I will when I look her in the eyes," said Neela. After some chit-chatting and discussion about their lives, Neela left the manor and headed for her home to get some good night's sleep. It was Noah's new policy to get enough rest and sleep instead of overexerting themselves cultivating. "She is gone," Alvaro said, though his house looked empty. The smile on Alvaro's face disappeared, and instead, a darkened expression occupied his face. A breeze of wind blew past Alvaro as it almost snuffed out the fire and light in the room. Then, A shadow figure dressed in all black emerged from the darkest corner in the house. Is she going to be a problem? The dark figure asked Alvaro in a thick otherworldly voice. Alvaro had a difficult time hiding the fear creeping down his spine. He swallowed mouthful of saliva and managed to turn his gaze toward the dark figure. No. She is just chasing some leads. Good. Because if she is a problem at best, you will hear from Noah Winston. The dark figure paused for a moment, letting the silence sink into Alvaro's mind. At worst, you will receive a visit from the Dark Queen, said the dark figure. Because of the dark hood covering his head, Alvaro couldn't make out the figure's features. Serving the Dark Lord could be a fruitful endeavor. He will only ask you for your loyalty. In return, you can get anything in this world, said the dark figure as Alvaro rolled his eyes. Spare me the sales pitch. What you're doing here is blackmailing. The only reason you are here and I am not at Noah's home is I don't have a choice, Alvaro growled. To Alvaro's surprise, the dark figure chuckled. Of course you have a choice. You can tell the Supreme Guardian that you feasted on a helpless woman when you weren't supposed to. You can tell him that your lust overshadowed your judgment. I heard your Supreme Guardian is a merciful person. What's the punishment for rape? Castration and lifetime prison? You can ask for forgiveness. You always have a choice. The dark figure amused as Alvaro burned with rage inside. We will be in touch, the dark figure said, giving no damn about Alvaro's fury. The figure turned around to leave when he looked over his shoulder at Alvaro. We have eyes everywhere, Alvaro. Engrave that in your mind. I think we both agree you do not want to meet the Dark Queen. You will hear from me soon. As he said, the dark figure disappeared from the room. Alvaro felt sweat beads trickling down his face after the dark figure left. A sin he committed in the shadows came back to haunt him. He thought he escaped the sin, but now, he was forced to be the Dark Lord's inside man in the Guardian Guild. Chapter 836 Beast of Itenes, Current Day. Michael was on his way to harvest everything he needed to fix the gold coins problem. Taskin and Thilv accompanied Michael as Vidora chose to stay with the tribe because they liked how the wood elves treated them. Almost all the trees had sparkling blue leaves instead of the usual green leaves. Not only the cyan color of the forest but something fresh in the air that put everyone at ease. Michael felt the forest around him was alive. Any predators around here? Michael asked Taskin and Thilv. Except for the wolves Michael killed at Tar's campsite, Michael met no predatory animals. The rabbits, foxes, and birds Michael saw had sparkling bodies. They glistened under the canopy's shade. They used to be around, Taskin started to answer Michael. But ever since the demons occupied the mother tree, they ran deeper into the forest. This place crawled with all kinds of creatures before they invaded us. You cannot walk a minute in the forest without catching a glimpse of something. Now it feels so void of life, said Taskin. You might meet a few where we are going, my lord, said Thilv. She addressed him as my lord instead of the Dark Lord. Michael grew quite tired of being called the Dark Lord by the elves sooner than he expected. Therefore, he ordered them to call him like his subordinates and men, my lord. At first, the wood elves seemed reluctant, but after Michael ordered them, they changed how they addressed him. The three of them enjoyed their walk in peace. Instead of bringing a group of elves with him, Michael only brought Thilv and Taskin. This couple seemed competent and knew the forest like the back of their hands. Plus, Michael wanted to know more about the two wood elves. So the humans here worship me or any other god? Asked Michael. We don't know much about them, my lord. They live far, far away from the mother tree. We call them the Water Tribe, said Thilv. Because they live nearby water? Asked Michael as Thilv nodded. I want to meet them someday before I leave this world. Thilv and Taskin stopped walking when they heard Michael. They turned around, worried. Are you going to leave us, my lord? Thilv's eyes watered. Taskin was actually stunned to see Thilv behave this way in front of the Dark Lord. She was a warrior with an iron heart. She was an alpha of their tribe before he married her. Seeing her show her vulnerable side surprised Taskin. I told you, there is entirely a new world out there where I must be. But fear not, I will visit you often. When the time comes, I will build a gateway connecting the worlds so people can travel between, said Michael. Speaking of the other world, Michael wondered how to leave this place without using badass points. Somehow Michael believed there was another way to get out of this world. The past Dark Lord may have left something for him since he seemed to leave a lot of things to guide Michael in his path. The God's World. Thilv asked with a completely stunned face. More like a messed up world where I have lots of enemies, Michael chuckled. Jokes aside, I do plan to bring you there. But not before I fix everything here. Clothing, for example, said Michael. My lord, what is wrong with our clothes? Thilv's naive question almost made Michael laugh, but he smiled and gestured at them to lead the way. Almost after 7 hours, the sun slowly descended toward the horizon. One would expect the forest to get dark, but on the contrary, the trees and vegetation around them glowed brighter. The luminescent leaves, mushrooms, and barks lit the forest like neon lights. Michael let Taskin and Thilv take some rest before continuing their journey. He lost track of time as he followed them behind deeper into the forest. Eventually, Michael noticed the veil of mist slowly appearing in his sight. We are getting closer to the spot, my lord, said Taskin. He looked a bit uncomfortable and borderline afraid. They were stranded far away from the mother tree and her protection. Usually, the wood elves would avoid traveling deep into the forest at any cost. All tribe elders prohibited venturing deeper into the forest as they believed it made the wood elves mad. Before we go further, put this on your face. Michael threw them black face masks with filters built within. They looked confused a bit until they saw Michael putting on the mask himself. After they put the masks on, they slowly walked through the fallen logs and knee-high vegetation. The deeper they went, the more they saw reddish leaves and trees instead of the bluish tree. Something turned the trees red, and Michael assumed the same thing that put the creatures to sleep. He looked around the trees and saw various creatures, such as rabbits, foxes, and even a green-furred tiger sleeping on the ground with its bellies up. The tiger purred, sleeping a few meters away from the trio. Don't make any sudden noise, Taskin warned Thilv as he crouched down to blend in with his surroundings. Michael followed the wood elves, and after a while, he felt like he was back in Demon's Grave where everything had a red hue like everything was drenched in blood. Not a single sound could be heard in that second. The eerie silence slowly turned into fear and anxiety. If Michael weren't here with them, Taskin and Thilv would have turned around and rushed out of this place instantly. But having their almighty god with them gave them enough courage to continue forward. They slowly walked past the sleeping tiger and arrived at a small pond. The crystal-clear water reflected the crimson-red surroundings as well as the silver mushrooms with black stars on them. Michael's eyes lit up as these mushrooms were what he looked for the most. Pick these mushrooms as many as you can, said Michael, bent down to pick one from the ground. The silver mushroom let out a cry as though it had a mouth when Michael rooted it out from the ground. These mushrooms grew under the shady roof of the forest while berries lay ripening under the leafy dome of the forest like jewels. The grass was crispy under their feet. Every tree Michael saw was skyscraper tall. Good thing Vidora wasn't here, or they would have tried to pick and eat the fruits that shone like silver snowflakes. The forest smelled fresh and organic. Even Michael's mask couldn't stop the natural musty smell of forest from penetrating the filters and entering their nostrils. Anyone who didn't know about the forest and the plants would be tempted to pick some wild pears and eat them. However, Michael knew better than to eat anything in the forest around him. Because every single tree, fruit, and plant was radiating a poisonous miasma that would put the brain in some kind of coma until they died. The creatures sleeping had developed a partial immune system to avoid death, but they couldn't avoid getting high. Thilv and Taskin followed Michael's hand movement and rooted out the mushrooms exactly how he did it. They put the mushrooms in a pile, wondering how they were going to bring them to the tribe. While Thilv and Taskin were harvesting the mushrooms, Michael went to the trees with red barks and scraped down the black moth growing on them. Michael hummed a tune of the song he heard back on Earth while collecting the moth in a glass jar. The little alchemist living inside him was utterly delighted to collect new ingredients to brew an entirely new potion that would put a full stop to poverty once and for all. This potion would serve as a new drug that makes people high while not affecting their physical bodies. In other words, by taking this potion, nothing would change physically. The user would only feel mind-numbing pleasure and high for a short amount of time and crave more. Since Michael was not a drug dealer, he planned to brew an antidote to remove the craving and urge. Moreover, Michael planned to make this potion ridiculously expensive so that only the rich and noble would be able to afford it. This way, the commoners would be spared by the new sensation drug he was about to make. It was only a temporary measure to enable the coin flow. His end goal was to invest in legit businesses and hotel chains, not dealing drugs. Even the Dark Lord had standards and limits. The last thing he wanted was to have a bunch of druggies roaming the streets of his beautiful world. He blamed Noah for closing down Majestic and Hades, which pushed him to go into the drug industry. As they were peacefully harvesting herbs and various ingredients in the forest, Thilv's ears twitched. She immediately stopped harvesting the mushrooms, turned around, and saw Taskin slowly reaching for his bow. It seemed like he heard the same rustling that she had heard just a moment ago. Taskin and Thilv looked over their shoulder to see Michael calmly walking around picking blueberries. "My lord," Taskin whispered, trying to get Michael's attention. "There is something approaching us." "Yes, I know that," Michael calmly answered Taskin. The brown sack into which Michael put the blueberries disappeared along with the pile of mushrooms on the ground. He then strolled toward Thilv and Taskin. "Stand back. I'll deal with it," said Michael. Unlike the wood elves, Michael was able to see the beast approaching them through his X-ray vision. Thilv and Taskin heard a strange gnawing sound. Soon, their noses twitched as the air began to reek of blood. They tried to see what was happening, but the foliage in the trees blocked their sight. But Michael could see everything. The beast was feasting on the sleeping tiger, which didn't even move an inch. The tiger was too high on the elements mixed in the air. Michael waited for the beast to finish feasting and approach them. He slowly drew his black sword from the sheath on his back. Somehow, the beast was immune to the air, unlike the tiger and the other creatures. Chapter 837. Fighting two beasts in the same day. Each moment felt like an eternity to Thilv and Taskin. They could hear their heartbeats slowly rising. Their eyes were fixed on the forest before them. Soon, the beast slowly stepped out of the cover of the trees and granted them a look at its body. Thilv and Taskin took a step back. The beast reminded Michael of the Komodo dragon back on Earth. It was a large lizard with long tails, a strong and agile neck, and sturdy limbs. The beast's tongue was red, forked, and oozed blood. It had a stone-color skin with distinct, large scales. The beast hissed at them but locked its gaze on Michael. Somehow, the beast sensed the real threat among the three was Michael. Perhaps the sword in his hand, or perhaps he himself threatened the beast. Michael felt Mother Luck was on his side today. While harvesting the ingredients, he pondered about the antidote. To brew an antidote, he needed something that was naturally immune to the air around him. That's where the beast came in. If he could get the beast's flesh and blood, he would be able to brew an antidote without a problem. Michael clenched his dark sword. One would be surprised to see the three dragons in his hilt wrap around his arms like they were alive and provide more grip. He didn't take out his second sword but decided to slice and dice the beast using one. Step by step, the beast strolled toward Michael. Thilv and Taskin slowly walked backward while maintaining their focus on the beast. However, the beast only focused on Michael. When the beast was just a few meters away from Michael, it started to gallop, increasing its speed significantly. Suddenly, the beast pushed its legs into the ground and lunged at Michael with its mouth wide open. The poor beast had no idea how fast Michael could move. He just swayed his body to the side and dashed forward with his blade tilted to the side. Thilv and Taskin felt a gust of wind blow past him as one beast became two. Michael's sword cut through the beast's body like a hot knife through butter. Two halves of the beast hit the ground with a sickening thud. Blood sprayed out everywhere, including Michael, Thilv, and Taskin. Michael sheathed his sword back into the sheath and turned around. The beast looked like neatly cut fish fillets, except it had more blood, bits of pieces of the tiger it just ate, and entrails. Although the wood elves were shocked at how quickly the beast died, they weren't disgusted by the sight of its dead body. This told Michael that these wood elves had witnessed much worse. Good, they aren't soft bloods, Michael said to himself. He flicked his wrist as a dagger, and a glass jar appeared in his hand. Then, Michael squatted beside the two halves of the body and carved out the beast's heart, flesh, and collected its blood into the jar. Once again, Michael hated the system for not giving him any experience points. But then again, killing a creature with no cultivation level was as easy as stepping on an ant. It was no challenge or thrill. After collecting the body parts of the beast, Michael turned his focus on the ingredients. "Shall we continue?" asked Michael as Thilv and Taskin snapped back to reality. They continued to collect the mushrooms. Hours passed without their notice. Michael enjoyed the momentary peace and quiet. Eventually, Michael picked enough mushrooms and harvested enough ingredients to get his potion business running for a few months. This time would be enough for him to earn gold coins and invest or build businesses to generate passive income. "It's enough," said Michael. Thilv and Taskin were sweating. The task exhausted them quite a bit. If you don't mind me asking, my lord, what are you planning to do with all these? They seem poisonous, Tazkin asked Michael. They are. But with a little bit of magic, the mushrooms could be turned into something special, Michael answered as he strolled toward the pond. He washed his face in the crystal-clear water. Then, he decided to return to the tribe. On the way back, Michael led them instead of the other way around. He memorized the path back to the tribe. Tazkin and Thilv followed him while cautiously looking around their surroundings. Almost after walking in peace and quiet for an hour, Michael slowed down. The red forest was far behind them, and they entered the forest part with sparkling blue trees. Something wrong, my lord? Tazkin questioned Michael. Climb up this tree and stay there, Michael pointed at the tall tree beside him. Tazkin and Thilv were bewildered, but they chose not to question their god. Tazkin nodded as he put his back against the tree, boosted his wife to the top, and climbed up the tree with Thilv's help. They used the branches and holes in the tree as stepping stones to reach the top. Michael leaned against the tree as though he was waiting for someone. Suddenly out of nowhere, an arrow soared through the air, piercing the veins, foliage, and saplings. The arrow almost hit Michael's wrist where he wore the Olympus. It didn't feel like whoever fired the arrow missed the mark but targeted the Olympus precisely. But before the arrow could hit Olympus and shatter it to pieces, Michael caught the arrow just a few inches away from Olympus. Upon sitting on the highest branch in the tree, Thilv and Tazkin were stunned. As far as they could see, no one was there. Still, the arrow came from somewhere. You are good marksman. I give you that. Michael's voice swept across the forest. Pity you are not as good as you think you are, said Michael. He was nonchalant about the arrow or who fired it. Ever since he stepped onto the demon's grave, he had a feeling someone was following him. Although the environmental scanning sensed nothing, his instincts told him that he was being followed. Yet again, his instincts were spot on. Whoosh! Michael heard the sound of the whistling wind as another arrow came from another direction. Not even a second passed when another arrow soared through the forest from the opposite direction of the previous arrow. Michael caught the two arrows just in time before they hit Olympus. Whoever you are, you want a fair fight. Am I right? Asked Michael. Arch energy from the crystals amplified Michael's voice to the point the creatures around him scattered away in fear. The arrows stopped. Then, Michael threw away the arrows and removed Olympus from his wrist. He had a feeling the one who fired the arrows was watching everything. Michael placed the Olympus on the ground and waited for the person to show themselves. Silence fell over them. A few seconds later, the vegetation around Michael rustled. Thrive, and Tazkin noticed something big and black approaching them. The figure lurked in the shadows and seemed to hide itself using the shadows. They perfectly blended with the forest despite how colorful the forest was. Stay up there, Michael said to Tazkin and Thilv when they seemed reluctant to stay still and let Michael handle the shadowy figure. The rustling noises pounded louder and louder as the figure finally stepped out of the shadows. Thilv and Tazkin were caught off guard. Simply put, they were stunned. It was a giant black panther that walked on its 2 feet like a human. Michael remained calm as the Black Panther cautiously made his way toward Michael but kept a safe distance. When Tazkin and Thilv looked closer, the Black Panther had more humanoid features than they initially saw. He had the face of a panther and shiny black fur, but his muscles and limbs looked more human than those of a panther. His black tail swayed with the wind. The Black Panther's eyes glistened with immense killing intent. Michael could feel the murderous lust radiating from the panther. Where did I see you before? Michael rubbed his chin. The Black Panther became more furious, seeing how calm Michael looked. However, except for his eyes, nothing betrayed the anger within the Black Panther's heart. It was a trait of a seasoned warrior. Michael was sure of that. They both slowly started to walk in a circle while maintaining eye contact. Michael snapped his fingers as his eyes brightened. You were with Tanulia Valrin, the invisible bodyguard. I knew I'd seen you somewhere, said Michael. But the rage within your eyes, it feels personal. Like I took away someone you loved. Don't tell me you were in love with Tanulia, Michael snickered. Nah, Michael shook his head. It's much more. Jacoby, the Black Panther finally opened his mouth. His voice sounded extremely thick and gritty. Since there were no beast men in Itanes and Tazkin and Thilv had never seen one, they were completely shocked. Their god looked smaller compared to the 7-foot monstrosity riddled with muscles. Yet, they saw no fear in the Dark Lord's eyes. Not that they expected a god to be afraid of a cat. Jacoby. Michael tilted his head, trying to recall the name. Sorry, no idea, Michael shrugged. Of course. Michael remembered Jacoby. Even if he didn't know the name, the Black Panther had a resemblance with only one person Michael had met. The one who tried to hunt down Gaia and almost succeeded. Everything started to make sense except how this Black Panther managed to not only enter the demon's grave but also come here. I shall make you remember then. Ghost. The Black Panther addressed Michael by his name instead of the Dark Lord. Before he disappeared, he was tracking Gaia, the Queen of Nagaland. Did you kill him? Asked the Black Panther. Michael could tell the Black Panther wanted some closure. He might be a good tracker, but he couldn't have found Jacobus' body because Michael burned it to ashes. The moment he agreed to track down Gaia, he sealed his own fate. But did I kill him? Michael rubbed his chin, pretending to think. Looking at the Black Panther and Michael, Phil and Taskin were utterly confused. But judging by their words, they could understand that there was some kind of history between the two of them. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.